Chapter 99. Boom! A deafening sound could be heard as the door of the cave abode was suddenly slammed open. Both doors were destroyed and fell heavily onto the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. The process of elixir formation could not be disturbed. Caught off guard, Suzimo was shocked, and the elixir that was about to be formed exploded on the spot. All his efforts were for naught. Not only that, Suzimo was still in a daze and even ate a mouthful of dust when he opened his mouth slightly. He had been busy for the entire afternoon and was about to succeed in refining the spirit-gathering elixir when something like this happened. At that moment, Suzimo even had a murderous intent. His head heated up and he nearly lost control of his bloodline and turned into a demon on the spot. Caw-caw. Right then, a familiar cry sounded from the entrance of the cave abode with a clear hint of mockery. Suzimo turned around slowly and caught sight of a crane standing at the entrance of the cave abode. It flapped its wings excitedly and its eyes were filled with the joy of success. Suzimo could not help but curse. However, he realized that his mouth was filled with dust and could only cough furiously. Caw-caw. When it saw that, the crane was even more excited. If it could laugh, it would have done so long ago. That crane was the same one that Suzimo fought with on the peak of the front mountain when he joined the sect. Suzimo recognized it right away. Of all times, that stupid bird had to appear at this moment. Suzimo was so angry that his knuckles cracked and his eyes turned red. Roar! Linghu leaped up and roared at Little Crane with widened eyes. Little Crane glanced at Linghu with contempt. Initially, Linghu did not dare to take the initiative to attack Little Crane that was already a spirit demon. However, when he caught sight of Little Crane's contemptuous gaze, Linghu was triggered. I can't tolerate this. I've got my pride too. Roaring, the spirit tiger's eyes spat fire as it charged forward with a ferocious aura. Bang! Linghu rolled back at an even faster speed, and with an even more ferocious aura. The moment it charged up, it was sent flying by Little Crane's wings. It rolled a few times on the ground and ate a mouthful of dust, looking extremely wretched. Linghu stood up and spat out the dust in his mouth. With a loud roar, he was about to charge again. Come back! Suzimo shouted. Without any hesitation, Linghu retreated, as if he had been waiting for Suzimo to speak. After all, Linghu was only a spirit beast and was no match for this stupid bird. Fine. Today you destroyed a cauldron of my pills. Our grudges are written off. From now on, don't come looking for me and I won't provoke you. How about it? Suzimo decided to have a good talk with this stupid bird. After all, there was not much hatred between them. If he couldn't solve this problem, he wouldn't have any peace in the future. Let alone refining pills. Suzimo wouldn't even be able to withstand Silly Bird's sudden attack during cultivation. Caw-caw. Little Crane raised its head in disdain. Suzimo frowned and muttered internally. By the looks of it, this stupid bird had no intention of letting things go. On account that your senior is the mystical guardian beast of the sect, I don't want to hurt you. You'd better not provoke me, Suzimo said slowly with a stern expression. Caw-caw, caw-caw. Little Crane cried out repeatedly with a provocative look in its eyes. Without saying anything, Suzimo slapped his storage bag and a blood-colored bow appeared in his hands. Knocking an arrow loading the bowstring, the bow was like a full moon. His movements were smooth and clean, as though he had practiced it countless times. Swoosh! The sound of an arrow tearing through the air rang out as a black light brushed past Little Crane by a hair's breadth. The arrow was so fast that Little Crane was caught off guard and was truly shocked. Suzimo said coldly, "That arrow was only a warning. If you provoke me again, the next arrow will take your life." Of course, Suzimo would not dare to kill that stupid bird unless he had a death wish. His words were only meant to scare it. Furthermore, this stupid bird was still in its infancy and was merely a little mischievous. It did not deserve death. Caw-caw. Instantly, Little Crane was enraged when it heard Suzimo's words. Flapping its wings, its gaze turned sharp. It wanted to fight with Suzimo. In a flash, Suzimo dashed out of the cave abode. Little Crane was prepared this time round and flapped its wings immediately. Circling in midair, its claws shone with a cold glint, ready to pounce down at any moment. Suzimo knocked another arrow. Swoosh! 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 3 arrows were shot out in succession. Little Crane dodged repeatedly in midair with its agile movements and dodged them with ease. Caw caw! Little Crane cried loudly, mocking Suzimo's archery skills. Suzimo was regretting it a little. Had he known, he would have pierced the stupid bird's wings with his first arrow while it was unprepared. But now Suzimo was in an awkward situation. Even if he could use sword kinesis flight, his agility in midair was far from comparable to a spirit crane with a pair of wings. He might not be able to unleash his combat strength even if he had it. Furthermore, Suzimo did not dare to engage in melee combat with the spirit crane at the moment. If he could not control his bloodline and showed signs of demonic transformation, the consequences would be dire. However, if he were to control his flying sword, Suzimo might not be able to hurt the spirit crane even if it did not move at all since he was only at level 6 chi condensation. There was no way to attack. Suzimo stood at the entrance of the cave abode for a while. Realizing that he could not do anything to the stupid bird, he could only return to the cave abode. Suzimo had just sat down and had yet to catch his breath when Little Crane landed at the entrance of the cave abode, chirping non-stop. That stupid bird! Enraged, Suzimo dashed out once more. Little Crane flew away once more. When Suzimo returned to the cave abode, Little Crane flew back as well. It did not enter the cave abode and merely looked at him mockingly at the entrance, chirping from time to time. Suddenly, Suzimo had an ominous feeling. If that stupid bird were to continue wasting time with him, he might not even be able to get a good night's sleep, let alone refine elixirs or raise his cultivation realm. True enough. The next day, Suzimo had just fixed the entrance of his cave abode when Little Crane barged in once more. Little Crane was outside while Suzimo was inside. The man, Crane and Linghu glared at each other for an entire day without achieving anything. Little Crane was never tired of it. The man and tiger were tormented. For the next few days, Little Crane would visit Suzimo's cave abode from time to time, chirping loudly outside. Sometimes, right after Little Crane left, the man and tiger heaved a sigh of relief and wanted to take the opportunity to take a nap. Unexpectedly, Little Crane would return. For the next few days, Suzimo did not have the chance to cultivate or refine elixirs. Even when he slept, he was on tenterhooks. The man and tiger had not slept for the past few days. Even Suzimo had lost a lot of weight, let alone Linghu. Linghu was on the brink of tears. Previously in this cave abode, it was tormented by Suzimo for no reason, roaring here and there. Now this stupid bird had popped out of nowhere to torment it. Linghu was already traumatized. For the past few days, he had been wondering if he should leave Suzimo temporarily and run to the forest to have a good night's sleep. Chapter 100. This morning Suzimo woke up with 2 huge dark circles under his eyes. His face was filled with fatigue and his eyes were bloodshot. He was speechless compared to Linghu, who was in the same state. Under the torment of Little Crane, the man and tiger did not sleep for the entire night once more. Suddenly Suzimo said, "We can't carry on like this. We've got to think of something." Linghu was listless as his head drooped and he was about to fall asleep. It was unrealistic to rely on Linghu to subdue Little Crane. Linghu had an ordinary bloodline, and it would take him a long time to become a spirit demon. Even if Linghu could become a spirit demon, he would not be able to fly and would only be led by the nose by Little Crane. Suzimo's current methods were not enough to subdue Little Crane as well. Neither man nor crane could hurt the other, but Suzimo could not afford to waste time. It wasn't that Suzimo had not thought of asking his sex seniors for help. However, Little Crane's status was extraordinary and his sex seniors might not be willing to help. Furthermore, Suzimo had a sense of pride as well. How could he be defeated by a stupid bird? After pondering for a long time, Suzimo looked at Linghu, who was not far away, and said solemnly, "I'm going out for a while. Don't follow me. That stupid bird won't bother you while I'm not around." When Linghu heard that, he was instantly energized and almost teared up. If Suzimo had not left, Linghu was prepared to hide for a while. Suzimo patted Linghu on the head and left the cave abode. Summoning his flying sword, he sped towards Array Peak. No matter how he thought about it, the only way to subdue the stupid bird was through formations. If he could set up a formation at the entrance of the cave abode like the sect-protecting fog formation, he would definitely be able to get rid of that stupid bird once and for all. Su Zimo was completely clueless about formations and had to learn everything from scratch. However, it was better than wasting time in the cave and not being able to do anything. Before long, Su Zimo arrived at Array Peak. It was early in the morning and there weren't many disciples on Array Peak. Most of them were cultivating in seclusion in their cave abodes to raise their cultivation realms. It was only at noon when an intersect array formation master came to give a lecture on array formations that many trial disciples would gather at Array Peak Square. Formations, talismans, and pills were the same, and they were divided into 9 levels. Those who were able to set up and decipher more than half of a Grade 1 formation could be considered as Elementary Formation Master. Rank 2 Array Formation, Intermediate Array Formation Master. Rank 3 Array Formation, Advanced Array Formation Master. There were many types of formations, and they could be generally divided into 4 categories: killing formations, trapping formations, illusory formations, and auxiliary formations. For example, the Sex 8 Distresses formation was a type of illusory formation. On the other hand, the Great Sect Protection formation was a combination of a trapping formation and an illusion formation. In layman's terms, the principle of a formation was to use all kinds of mysterious and complicated formation patterns to gather more spirit chi and thus stimulate all kinds of power. There was a unique landmark on Array Peak that was different from the other 4 peaks. It was the 10 Formations Pagoda that was located at the west of Array Peak, right beside the Spirit Arena. There were a total of 10 levels to the 10 Formations Pagoda, and each level contained a set of formations. Once a cultivator entered, they would automatically step into the formation, and they would only be able to ascend to the second level after deciphering the formation on the first level. Following that, only cultivators who could clear the first 5 levels of the formation were qualified to be called Elementary Formation Masters. Su Zimo's arrival did not cause much of a stir, but many Array Peak disciples were surprised. There was only half a year left to the year-end face-off and everyone knew that Su Zimo had to refine pills and weapons as well as compete with Feng Haoyu. There was no way he had enough time. Now that Su Zimo had actually come to Array Peak to listen to a lecture, many disciples assumed that he had given up on his fight with Feng Haoyu and laughed it off. How could the Array Peak disciples know that Su Zimo had no choice but to do so? Naturally, he wanted to focus all his efforts on refining elixirs, raising his cultivation and learning sword kinesis techniques. But now that a stupid bird had arrived, his original plans were completely disrupted. From that day forth, Su Zimo stayed in Array Peak temporarily. Array Peak naturally would not provide Su Zimo with a cave abode. Therefore, Su Zimo spent his days in the array chamber, rarely showing himself as he flipped through the vast array of formations within. He started from the most basic of formations, starting from scratch, exploring and researching continuously. There was naturally no way Little Crane would let Su Zimo off so easily. However, since Su Zimo was in the array chamber the entire time, it was not appropriate for Little Crane to create a ruckus there. It could only scoff internally, "Humph, I don't believe that you'll just hide in there forever." For the next period of time, Su Zimo remained in Array Peak without leaving. Not only did Su Zimo memorize all the Grade 1 formations in the array chamber, he did not neglect even the Grade 2 formations as he studied them continuously. Little Crane was a demon beast at the level of a spirit demon. If one wanted to use formations to restrain it, Grade 1 formations would be difficult. Only Grade 2 formations would be possible. Grade 1 formations could kill, trap and confuse spirit beasts. However, spirit demons were far stronger than spirit beasts, and could destroy Grade 1 formations with brute force. Su Zimo took less than a month to memorize and comprehend Grade 1 formations. The reason why he was so fast was because he had spent all his time and effort on formations. In the cultivation world, there were very few people who would be so extreme. As for Su Zimo, he was truly driven crazy by Little Crane and could only make use of every second to comprehend the Tao of formations. While Grade 1 formations were relatively simple, Grade 2 formations were much more complicated. Su Zimo spent more than 2 months to memorize and comprehend more than half of the Grade 2 formations. 3 months. Su Zimo stayed in Array Peak for an entire 3 months. It had to be said that Su Zimo was smart and extremely talented. Back when he was cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, Yu had already noticed that. Coupled with Little Crane's coercion, Su Zimo immersed himself wholeheartedly into the Tao of formations and gained quite a bit. There were 2 levels to the array chamber. The second level was filled with grade 2 formation scrolls and there was almost no one there. Because Su Zimo spent the next 2 months on the second level of the array chamber, most of the array peak disciples thought that he had left long ago and gradually forgot about him. This morning, Su Zimo walked out of the array chamber. The long-awaited sunlight was a little blinding. Su Zimo stood at the entrance of the array chamber for a while, going through everything he had learned in the past 3 months in his mind before heading to the 10 Formations Pagoda. No matter how deep his understanding of formations was, he had to test it out. The purpose of the 10 Formations Pagoda was to test Su Zimo's attainments in formations in the past 3 months. To the left of the 10 Formations Pagoda was Array Peak's Spirit Arena. To the right was a tall stone stele with rows of words written on it. The first row was the name, the middle row was the level of the 10 Formations Pagoda, and the last row was the time taken. Su Zimo took a quick glance and did not pay much attention to it. Because it was early in the morning, there were no other trial disciples around the 10 Formations Pagoda. There was only an old man sitting at the entrance with a straight face, looking hale and hearty with bright eyes. Chapter 101. Senior, I'm here to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda. May I know what to take note of? Su Zimo came before the old man and asked respectfully. Even though Su Zimo had been in Array Peak for 3 months, this was his first time in the 10 Formations Pagoda. The old man paused for a moment on Su Zimo's face and sized him up before asking, "You don't look familiar. You're not a disciple of Array Peak, right?" "I'm from Weapon Peak," Su Zimo nodded. "Oh," the old man replied and glanced at the sect badge on Su Zimo's waist. Then he handed him a wooden badge and said in a deep voice, "Take this badge. If you can't hold on or encounter any danger inside, crush this badge immediately and you'll be teleported out safely." "There's danger in the 10 Formations Pagoda?" Su Zimo was slightly stunned. The old man explained patiently, "Level 1 of the 10 Formations Pagoda is simple. As long as you set up a support grade 1 formation, you'll be able to ascend to level 2. Level 2 is a type of illusion formation that appears randomly. You'll have to dispel the illusion before you can ascend to level 3. Level 3 is a trap formation. Once you walk out of it, you'll be able to see the entrance to level 4. Level 4 is a killing formation. It's extremely dangerous and you'll lose your life if you're not careful. If you can't dispel it, don't force yourself and crush this badge. The 5th floor tests a combination of formations. You can combine any 2 of the trapping formation, illusory formation, or killing formation. Only by breaking the combination of formations can you be considered a beginner formation master, and continue to the 6th floor. Su Zimo had a rough understanding of the 10 Formations Pagoda as he bowed and thanked the old man before entering. Looking at Su Zimo's back view, the old man smiled and muttered to himself, "It's rare for a disciple of Weapon Peak to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda. I wonder how many levels that lad can pass. Level 2? Su Zimo. That name sounds familiar. I think I've heard it somewhere before." The old man murmured and shook his head, not thinking too much about it. After all, many disciples came to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda daily, and the old man only paid attention to the elites of Array Peak. 10 Formations Pagoda Level 1. This was an extremely spacious room. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing at all. The ground was a little strange. It was soft and elastic. This room was sealed off on all sides. As soon as Su Zimo stepped in, the door behind him was tightly shut, and he could not see the entrance to the 2nd floor. Su Zimo thought for a moment and understood. The entrance to the 2nd level would only appear if he set up an auxiliary array formation on the ground. Thinking of this, Su Zimo no longer hesitated. He shot out a stream of spirit energy from his fingertips, squatted on the ground and carefully drew. Su Zimo had drawn a soundproof array. In the soundproof array, no matter what sound was made outside, the people inside would not be able to hear it. This was the first formation that Su Zimo had learned, and its purpose was naturally to isolate the little crane's cry. The carving of formation runes required full concentration, without the slightest distraction or deviation. As long as there was a slight deviation, even if it was just a tiny bit, the formation would not be activated and it would mean that the formation had failed. This required a cultivator to be extremely patient and have a high level of control over the details. It would be best if they were at the peak. Array formation masters were meticulous people. Formations could be seen as a game of chess, and the array formation master was the gambler. The game of chess was unpredictable, and a single wrong move would result in the loss of the entire game. For array formation masters, the slightest deviation in the formation runes would result in all their previous efforts being wasted. The soundproof array was relatively simple, and the formation runes were not complicated. Before long, Su Zimo drew an array formation on the ground. A spirit stone was placed in the eye of the formation, and the formation runes on the ground shone brightly. The soundproof array was activated. Crack! 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 At the same time, a stone door rose from the southern wall, revealing a stone staircase that led to level 2. On the ground, the soundproof array formation runes that Su Zimo had just drawn dissipated gradually, and the ground returned to normal. The spirit stone that was placed in the eye of the formation popped out. What an ingenious setup! Chuckling, Su Zimo picked up the spirit stone and walked to level 2. The moment he entered level 2, Su Zimo's body shuddered. There were towering mountains, misty clouds, green waters, and a majestic palace before him. It was like a paradise on earth. Su Zimo realized that he had already entered an illusion formation. From level 2 onwards, it was a test of the sect disciples' ability to decipher formations. The principle behind deciphering a formation was simple. One had to find the core of the formation, also known as the eye of the formation. The higher the grade of the formation, the more eye points it would have. For grade 1 formations, there would only be a single eye. For grade 2 formations, there would be 2. If one wanted to decipher a grade 2 formation, one would not be able to find a single eye. One would have to find both and destroy them in order to decipher the formation. Although it sounded easy, it was extremely difficult to find the eye of the formation within a formation. For example, the eye of the illusion array in front of him could be a seemingly ordinary plant, a cloud floating above his head, a rock on a mountain peak, or a fish swimming in a stream. A single formation was a world unto itself. If someone who knew nothing about formations wanted to find the eye of the formation and destroy it, they might not even be able to do so even if they spent their entire lives in effort. However, array formation masters could use their understanding of formations to deduce and analyze to find the eye of the formation. One thing was for sure. The eye of the formation was definitely not ordinary. While it might look ordinary upon closer inspection, one would realize that there was something unusual about the eye of the formation. A skilled array formation master would be able to conceal the eye of the formation so well that it was difficult for others to detect it. Right as Su Zimo stepped into level 2 of the 10 Formations Pagoda, a large group of disciples from Array Peak walked over. Their leader wore black robes and had a cold expression. His eyes were calm and his hands were behind his back. Even though he was only at level 9 Qi condensation, he had the bearing of an expert. His name was Zhongwan, and he was publicly acknowledged as an outstanding talent among the trial disciples. He was a genius of the sect and the number 1 of Array Peak. Right now, he was already an elementary array formation master, and had cleared level 6 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. However, he was stuck at level 7. Today, Zhongwan was here to challenge level 7 once more to see if he could clear it. Even if he couldn't, he wanted to break the record of clearing level 6 and break his own record. Knowing that Zhongwan was here to challenge the pagoda today, many disciples of Array Peak gathered behind him to watch. Senior Brother Zhong, I wish you success this time round and become the first person in the history of the sect to clear level 7. Senior Brother Zhong is now a level 9 Qi refinement warrior. There are still many chances before you reach foundation establishment. You might even be able to clear level 8 in the future. Many Weapon Peak disciples behind him complimented him. Although Zhongwan was only in his 20s and looked mature, he could not help but feel smug when he heard those words. No matter what, being the number 1 of any of the 5 peaks was something to be proud of. Zhongwan's gaze landed on the gigantic stone stele on the right of the 10 Formations Pagoda as a look of pride flashed through his eyes. Chapter 102. The stone stele was ancient and majestic. It was about 10 feet tall and was called the 10 Formations stele. As a trial disciple of Misty Peak, it was a great honor to be able to leave one's name on the 10 Formations stele. The 10 Formations stele carried the memories of Misty Peak for thousands of years, and witnessed the changes in the sect. There were 100 names on it. All of them were geniuses of a rare peak in the history of the sect. Time was merciless and cultivators were not spared either. Most of the geniuses had passed away long ago, and the only trace of them was on the stele. Behind every name was the number of levels they cleared and the time they took. The higher the level cleared, the higher the ranking. For the same level, the less time taken, the higher the ranking. The bottom 30-odd rows of the 10 formation stele were for trial disciples who cleared level 4. Most of the rows in the middle were for disciples who cleared level 5, and the ones at the top took 12 hours. The first 10-odd rows were for disciples who cleared level 6. The first name was Zhongwen, who had just arrived at the 10 Formations Pagoda. The current number 1 of Array Peak. Zhongwen had the right to be proud. That was because he had already surpassed all of the Array Peak geniuses that had appeared in the sect for thousands of years. He was the true number 1 of Array Peak. There was a line of words on the first row of the 10 Formations stele. Zhongwen cleared level 6 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. Took 5 hours. Suddenly, level 2 of the 10 Formations Pagoda shone brightly, attracting the attention of many Array Peak disciples. Only by clearing the test of the 10 Formations Pagoda's formations would this level shine with a unique light. Zhongwen said indifferently, "To think that someone would come earlier than me today. Interesting. Greetings, Elder Luo." Arriving before the 10 Formations Pagoda, Zhongwen bowed slightly to the old man at the entrance. When Elder Luo saw Zhongwen, a look of admiration flashed through his eyes as he asked, "You're here so early. Are you planning to attempt level 7 this time round?" "Yes." Zhongwen nodded. Pausing for a moment, he continued, "I've gained quite a bit during this period of time. Even if I can't clear level 7, I should be able to break the record on the 10 formation stele." The record he was referring to was naturally set by Zhongwen himself. In Zhongwen's eyes, there was no disciple of the 5 peaks who could compare to him in terms of formations. What he needed to do was to constantly challenge himself. "All right, I'll be waiting for your return." Elder Luo smiled and gave Zhongwen a wooden token. Zhongwen nodded at the many Array Peak disciples behind him and entered the 10 Formations Pagoda. Zhongwen was very familiar with breaking through arrays. Upon entering level 1 of the 10 Formations Pagoda, Zhongwen did not hesitate at all. Spirit chi seeped out from his fingertips as he waved his hand to draw a formation pattern beneath his feet. He chose the simplest type of support formation. Breaking through the array not only depended on how many levels one could pass but also how long it would take. Zhongwen naturally wouldn't waste any time. Soon the formation was completed. Zhongwen placed a spirit stone in the eye of the formation. The formation lit up and the entrance to the second level appeared. Zhongwen put away the spirit stones and rushed up to the second level. Similar to Su Zimo, Zhongwen entered an illusory formation as soon as he stepped into the second level. Zhongwen's expression was calm as he surveyed his surroundings. He walked around casually, stopping from time to squat on the ground and observe. 15 minutes later, Zhongwen heaved a sigh of relief and summoned his flying sword, stabbing it into the ground not far away. In a trance, the illusory formation disappeared and the entrance to the third level appeared before him. Zhongwen was in excellent condition as he walked towards the third level confidently. Right now, Su Zimo was in the trap formation of the third level as well. Even though the two of them were on the same level, they were in different formations and would not bump into each other nor affect each other. Outside the 10 Formations Pagoda, the crowd gasped when they saw the light of the formation pattern on the second level. Senior Brother Zhong has already cleared 2 levels in 15 minutes. That's even faster than before. That's for sure. If he wasn't absolutely confident, Senior Brother Zhong wouldn't have come here so easily. More and more trial disciples gathered when they heard that Zhongwen was challenging the 10 Formations Pagoda today. After another hour, level 3 of the 10 Formations Pagoda shone with a bedazzling brilliance. He passed. Yes, an hour. It's about the same as before. Many Array Peak disciples gathered and discussed. I wonder how long Senior Brother Zhong will take to clear level 4. I remember that he took 2 hours the previous time. Actually, the first 4 levels are still alright since it's just a single formation. Level 5 is the hardest since it's a combination of formations, and the difficulty is doubled. Time passed by quickly and another 2 hours passed. Level 4 shone brightly and many disciples were invigorated. Just as they were about to speak, level 3 of the 10 formations pagoda shone once more, causing a commotion. There's someone else apart from senior brother Zhong? An array peak disciple who arrived later asked in confusion. Typically speaking, most array peak disciples would choose to avoid Zhongwen's challenge, even though the challengers would not affect each other in the 10 formations pagoda. If they knew that they were challenging the pagoda at the same time as the number 1 of array peak, the pressure would definitely increase and their results would not be the best. That guy sure is bold to challenge the pagoda with senior brother Zhong. Someone sneered. I wonder who that guy is. He's going to suffer at level 4. Fufu, I'll just wait here and see that guy get sent out of the 10 formations pagoda in a wretched state. Many array peak disciples were waiting to see him make a fool of himself. Elder Luo was shocked as he turned back to look at the 10 formations pagoda, recalling a green-robed disciple with delicate features. A disciple of weapon peak? Shaking his head, Elder Luo chuckled and murmured, to think that this lad would be able to clear level 3 as well. He's rather talented in formations. I wonder why he chose to join weapon peak back then. In reality, it wasn't just the array peak disciples. Even Elder Luo did not think highly of Su Zimo. In his opinion, even if Su Zimo could clear level 3, there was no way he could clear level 4. That was because the formation in level 4 of the 10 formations pagoda was a killing formation. Every single step was filled with killing intent and one could lose their life on the spot if they were not careful. Under such a stressful environment, most people would be scared out of their wits and would instinctively choose to crush the wooden badge to be sent out, let alone calm down to clear the formation. For someone like Su Zimo who was challenging the 10 formations pagoda for the first time and had never experienced a killing formation before, there was no way he could clear this stage. Level 4 wasn't just a test of one's understanding of formations. It was also a test of one's mentality, guts and boldness in the face of life and death. The key to the 4th level was how to calm down, analyze the array, and detect the flaws in the array in the most perilous environment. However, be it the disciples of Array Peak or Elder Luo, none of them understood Su Zimo. Compared to the nighttime in Songlang Mountain Range, the dangers of a Grade 1 killing formation were way too weak for Su Zimo. Furthermore, Su Zimo possessed an ability that no one else possessed: spirit perception. Right now, Array Peak was as calm as a lake and Su Zimo's accidental intrusion was like a stone that had been tossed into the lake. At that moment, no one realized that the landing of the stone did not create a ripple of light. Instead, it created a tsunami that would engulf the 5 peaks and shock the entire sect. Chapter 103. Su Zimo, who had just entered level 4 of the 10 formations pagoda, did not know that someone had just cleared this level, nor did he know that there were more and more Array Peak disciples outside who were starting to notice him. Level 4 was a killing formation. Killing formations were the most powerful of all formations. If a cultivator fell into it and had no way out, they would be buried in the formation if they didn't have enough strength to break the formation. Even if a cultivator could defend against the power of the killing formation for the time being, their strength would eventually run out, and they would eventually be destroyed by the might of the formation. However, killing formations were the easiest to break through among the formations. The purpose of killing formations was to kill and destroy everything. As the saying goes, things always move in the opposite direction when they reach an extreme. There was no absolute destruction in this world. Therefore, there was bound to be a chance of survival in the midst of destruction. As long as one could find that chance, they would naturally be able to break through the killing formation. Not far ahead was a volcano with thick smoke billowing out. The moment Su Zimo entered this place, a loud rumble echoed from the mountain. Immediately after, countless crimson magma gushed out from the crater of the volcano. Huge rocks that were burning with raging flames fell from the sky with a frightening momentum. Black smoke filled the air, obscuring one's vision along with the suffocating black dust. It was as though the apocalypse had arrived and the world was collapsing. In the face of such a destructive force, other self-cultivators would immediately crush their protective talismans and subconsciously turn around to escape from the range of the falling lava. However, that was an extremely unwise move. This was a formation. Unless the formation was broken, there was no way cultivators could break out. In other words, no matter how fast a cultivator was in the formation, they would not be able to escape the range of the lava. With a calm expression, Su Zimo summoned his flying sword and leaped down. Instead of retreating, he advanced forward. All the vegetation on the ground had already been incinerated and bubbling lava flowed with a scorching temperature. In the blink of an eye, the ground beneath Su Zimo had turned into a scarlet lava ocean, leaving only unmelted rocks exposed. For other array formation masters, they would have to avoid the power of the killing formation while analyzing how to break through it. But for Su Zimo there was no need for that. There were dangers everywhere in the killing formation. But there was one place where Su Zimo's spiritual sense did not react. This place was where the flaw in the killing array was. Since the purpose of the illusory formation and the trap formation was not to kill, but to confuse and restrain, Su Zimo could not sense any danger. His spiritual perception was useless. If he wanted to break these two formations, he could only rely on his own abilities. But in the killing formation, Su Zimo had spiritual perception, and all the arrangements became mere decorations. Soon Su Zimo arrived at the rock. This rock looked very ordinary and could barely support one person. It was no different from the other protruding rocks in the lava. But as long as he stood on this rock without moving, he would be able to avoid all the dangers in the killing array. If anyone could see this scene, they would definitely be dumbfounded. Blazing lava continued to fall, densely packed. However, a green-robed man stood in the middle of this overwhelming lava, completely unharmed. Finding this rock could not be considered as breaking the killing array. After all, the volcano was erupting continuously, and there was no telling when it would stop. Su Zimo could not possibly waste his time here. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and looked at the ordinary rock beneath his feet with a smile in his eyes. Logically speaking, this rock should be the formation core of the killing array. However, if his guess was wrong and the killing array was not broken, even if he destroyed this rock, the intruder would fall into the boiling lava and be burnt to a crisp. The array formation master who set up this formation had truly put in a lot of effort. It was not only a test of a cultivator's ability to break formations, but also their courage. It was a test of whether they would dare to break their only life-saving straw. In reality, the array formation master's thoughts coincided with the operation of the killing array. They were both seeking survival in the face of death. Su Zimo smiled and stomped his foot. Boom! The rock beneath his feet shattered and Su Zimo's figure fell. Just as he was about to fall into the lava, everything around him vanished and he regained his footing. The entrance to level 5 had appeared. Su Zimo strode over. At the same time, outside the 10 Formations pagoda. Not long after level 3 lit up, level 4 lit up as well. The discussions of the Array Peak disciples came to a halt. Everyone's mouths were agape as they stared at the 10 Formations pagoda not far away in a daze. Sensing something, Elder Luo turned back as well. Elder Luo was also stunned when he saw the flickering array pattern on the 4th floor. That lad had cleared level 4? Furthermore, it was so fast that he only used 17 breaths? How was that possible? Countless questions surged through Elder Luo's mind as he frowned in confusion. What did I just see? Why did level 4 light up as well? From the moment he stepped into level 4 to the time it lit up, it seemed like it only took him a dozen breaths. How could he be so fast? Who is that? After a momentary silence, a commotion broke out in the crowd as many Array Peak disciples discussed with shocked expressions. Even the number 1 of Array Peak, Zhongwan, took an entire 2 hours to clear level 4. How could someone use only a dozen breaths to break the 4th layer of the array formation? I've got it. Suddenly, a disciple said, other than senior brother Zhong, there must be 2 other people in the 10 Formations pagoda. One of them cleared level 3 and the other cleared level 4. Right. That must be the case. Another disciple nodded hurriedly in realization. Yes, it must be a coincidence. The first person cleared level 3 and the second person cleared level 4. That scared me to death. Didn't I say that it's impossible? The expressions of the Array Peak disciples relaxed as the commotion died down. After all, most of them were still unable to break through the 4th layer of the formation. If they knew that someone had cleared level 4 in less than 20 breaths, it would be a huge blow to them. When he heard the discussions, Elder Luo lowered his head slightly, trying his best to conceal the shock in his eyes. No one knew better than him that there were only 2 people who had entered the 10 Formations pagoda since morning. Since Zhongwan had cleared level 4, There was only a single possibility for someone to clear level 4's killing formation in less than 20 breaths. It was none other than the trial disciple from Weapon Peak, Su Zimo. Elder Luo glanced sideways at the 10 formation stele. The 30-odd rows at the bottom of the 10 formation stele were all formation geniuses who had cleared level 4 in the past few years. The fastest disciple was Situ Boyan at 3 hours. Even if Su Zimo failed at level 5, he would definitely leave a mark on the 10 formation stele and be ranked above Situ Boyan. As for that lad, he took an unprecedented 17 breaths to clear level 4. Chapter 104. Right after Zhongwen entered level 5 of the 10 Formations Pagoda, Su Zimo did the same. This was the final test to become an elementary array formation master. Combination formation. Even beginner array formation masters had different levels of understanding of array formations. Some people could combine 2 types of array formations together, while others could combine 3 types of array formations together, or even more. Level 5's combination formation was a combination of any 2 types of formations: illusion, trap, and killing. The reason why it was difficult was because the patterns of the combination formation were intertwined and difficult to differentiate, and it was easy to make a wrong judgment. At the same time, the combination of 2 grade 1 formations meant that there were 2 formation cores, increasing the difficulty of deciphering the formation. Even though grade 2 formations had 2 formation cores as well, the combination of 2 grade 1 formations was still not as difficult as deciphering a grade 2 formation. The reason was simple. Destroying 1 formation core of the combination formation was equivalent to destroying one of the major formations in the combination formation, leaving only 1 major formation, and it was much easier. However, the destruction of 1 formation core of a grade 2 formation meant that the latter was still around. Standing on the spot, Su Zimo sensed for a moment and realized that he was in a combination formation of a trap and illusion formation. Average luck. Su Zimo muttered softly. If it was a combination formation with a killing formation, it would be much easier for Su Zimo. However, given Su Zimo's current understanding of formations, it wasn't difficult for him to clear level 5. It was just that it would take a longer time. Time passed by bit. The many array peak disciples outside the 10 Formations Pagoda did not leave. At that moment, most of them were not focused on Zhongwen. Instead, they were curious about the person who had just cleared level 4. When it was close to evening, level 5's formation finally lit up. It must be Senior Brother Zhong. Yes, Senior Brother Zhong has broken the record again. He's even faster than before. I wonder if he'll be able to clear level 6. Many disciples started discussing once more. From level 6 onwards, the array formation master's understanding of grade 2 formations was tested. Level 6 was similar to level 1, where one merely had to set up a grade 2 support formation. The array patterns of a tier 2 array formation were much more complicated than a tier 1 array formation. The difficulty also increased exponentially. The slightest mistake would result in the failure of setting up the array. Many array peak disciples knew that they would know if they could clear level 6 within 2 hours. Everyone waited patiently. 2 hours were about to pass, but the runes on the 6th floor still hadn't lit up. Suddenly, at the entrance of the 10 Formations Pagoda, the space blurred and a figure appeared. Everyone's heart trembled, and they hurriedly looked over. Zhongwen. Alas, it's a pity that I didn't pass the 6th level. Actually, it's not that bad. Senior Martial Brother Zhong took an even shorter time to clear the first 5 levels. He has already broken the previous record. After all, he had been through a killing formation in the 10 Formations Pagoda. Although his clothes were tattered and he looked wretched, his expression was calm and his gaze was resolute as he looked towards the 10 Formation stele right away. The first row of the 10 Formation stele suddenly flashed with a dazzling light. His name was still Zhongwen, and the words in the middle had not changed. He had still passed the 5th level, but the time taken had changed from 5 hours to 5 hours and a quarter. Zhongwen heaved a sigh of relief. At the final juncture of setting up the grade 2 formation, his arm had trembled slightly and the runes had deviated slightly. It was a pity that all his efforts had gone to waste. However, it was still a small gain for breaking his own record. Elder Luo smiled. Not bad, not bad. Continue working hard when you return and try to clear level 6 before you become an inner sect disciple. Don't worry, Elder Luo. Level 6 won't be able to stop me. Zhongwen was brimming with confidence. He believed that he would definitely be able to clear level 6 as long as he returned and studied for a while more. Zhongwen bid farewell to Elder Luo with cupped fists and nodded to the many array peak disciples behind him before turning to leave. After taking a few steps, Zhongwen noticed something amiss. The reason why these array peak disciples were here was to see if he could create a new record. But now that he had left, none of them had any intention of leaving. Now that night had arrived, what were these disciples doing here if they weren't here to challenge the pagoda? Zhongwen stopped in his tracks and swept his gaze across the faces of the array peak disciples. He realized that everyone's gazes would shift towards the 10 Formations pagoda from time to time, as though they were waiting for something. Could someone be here to challenge the pagoda? Apart from him, who else in the 5 peaks would be able to attract the attention of so many people? Frowning, Zhongwen came to an array peak disciple and asked in a seemingly casual manner, "Junior brother Wang, what are you guys waiting for?" The disciple with the surname Wang was a little flustered as he stammered. "There are 2 more people challenging the pagoda. One of them has already cleared level 4, but I don't know who it is. I'm thinking of waiting for that person to come out and take a look. I'm just curious to see who that person is." Another disciple smiled awkwardly. After all, they were the ones who accompanied Zhongwen to challenge the pagoda initially. Now that Zhongwen had left and they were stuck here with their attention on someone else, they felt a little embarrassed. Zhongwen's expression was relaxed as he smiled and waved it off. "Alright, since I have nothing to do, I'll stay here and take a look as well." The moment he said that, the light of level 5 of the 10 Formations pagoda flashed. The crowd was in an uproar. He cleared level 5? That's enough to leave his name on the 10 Formations stele. Amazing! Who is that person? When he heard the discussions of the crowd, Zhongwen's expression turned grim. He knew very well that the patterns of a grade 2 formation were much more complicated, and there was no way that person could clear level 6. However, for some reason, Zhongwen felt uneasy and vaguely felt that his position was being threatened. Elder Luo's gaze lingered on level 5 for a long time before retracting slowly. Where did that disheveled old man pick up a treasure? To think that he's a formation genius. However, how did that lad clear the killing formation in 17 breaths? Could the formation core of the killing formation be right beside him? Look! Elder Luo frowned in deep thought. The array peak disciples who had no intention of leaving to begin with were even more reluctant to leave now that they saw that the mysterious challenger had cleared level 5. Level 6 tested a grade 2 formation, and the outcome of whether one could clear it would be revealed within 2 hours. None of them cared about waiting another 2 hours. The night gradually darkened. After standing in front of the 10 Formations pagoda for an entire day without eating or drinking, even the Qi refinement warriors were tired and fatigue could be seen in their eyes. It's already been an hour. It'll be soon. Yes, let's wait and see. Right after the array peak disciple said that, the light of level 6 of the 10 Formations pagoda flashed, illuminating the entire night sky. Silence ensued. Hundreds of array peak disciples raised their heads and opened their mouths, forgetting to breathe for a moment. Everyone's expressions were frozen at that moment. Their gazes were filled with confusion, bewilderment, astonishment, shock. Su Zimo did not even need 2 hours to clear level 6 in just an hour. Elder Luo bolted upright and gazed at the light of level 6 of the 10 Formations pagoda, lamenting internally, "Amazing, amazing! A true formation genius has appeared in this sect." Chapter 105. A new record was born for the 10 Formations Pagoda Challenge. Its birth was so sudden, so unexpected, and so shocking. Initially, this was supposed to be the most ordinary day on Array Peak. However, when the light of level 6 of the 10 Formations Pagoda shone, this day was no longer ordinary. The birth of a new record also meant that Zhongwen's title as the number 1 of Array Peak had changed hands from this very night. Many Array Peak disciples turned to look at Zhongwen instinctively. Zhongwen's expression was extremely terrible as he glared at level 6 of the 10 Formations pagoda fiercely. He gripped his fists so tightly that his arms were trembling. Everyone could more or less empathize with Zhongwen's feelings right now, and could not help but look at him with pity. If it was anyone else in Zhongwen's shoes, they would probably find it hard to accept this reality as well. Zhongwen closed his eyes for a long time before letting out a long sigh. By the time he opened his eyes once more, they were filled with vigor as he returned to his confident state. When he saw that, Elder Luo nodded silently. The fact that Zhongwen was able to break free from such a huge blow meant that his mental state was rather good as well. His future achievements would definitely not be low. Very good. Finally, there's someone who can give me pressure. Zhongwen smiled and muttered to himself. It's been a long time since I've had this feeling. Even though I don't know who you are, your appearance will force out my strongest self. With that said, Zhongwen looked deeply at the 10 Formations Pagoda before turning to leave without lingering. The Array Peak disciples realized that it wouldn't be long before Zhongwen returned to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda once more. At that time, it would depend on who took the shortest time to clear level 6 of the 10 Formations Pagoda to become the number 1 of Array Peak. However, the Array Peak disciples did not intend to leave after Zhongwen's departure. Everyone was even more curious as they wanted to see for themselves who this mysterious challenger was. None of them had expected that the challenger would be able to clear level 7 of the pagoda formation. To them, it wouldn't be long before the challenger would be teleported out. However, time passed bit by bit and the challenger did not appear at all, as though he had already taken up residence in the 10 Formations Pagoda silently. Just like that, the night passed as the sun rose. The many Array Peak disciples in front of the 10 Formations Pagoda were tired after not sleeping for a day and night. They stretched their bodies casually to refresh themselves. What is this person doing in there? If he can't hold on, then hurry up and come out. Why is he staying in there for so long? I don't know. I can't take it anymore. I need to go back and rest. One of the disciples couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. He shook his head and didn't intend to continue wasting time here. I'm going back too. Since this person has passed the 6th level, he'll definitely leave his name on the 10 Formation stele. We'll see who it is then, another disciple said. At this moment, someone flew over on a sword at an extremely fast speed. When they got closer, everyone focused their gazes and saw that it was Zhongwen who had left last night. In one night, Zhongwen had returned. It could be imagined that Zhongwen had not slept at all that night, and he had spent all his energy on studying Tier 2 formations. Zhongwen came before Elder Luo and said in a deep voice, Elder, I want to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda again. All right. Elder Luo nodded and handed Zhongwen a wooden token. After receiving it, Zhongwen turned and entered the 10 Formations Pagoda. When the disciples who were about to leave saw that, they hesitated once more. Cough cough. How about we hold on for another day and see if Senior Brother Zhong can suppress that person and regain the number 1 spot on the 10 Formation stele? That's good too. Let's hold on for another day. In the end, those disciples couldn't resist their curiosity and chose to stay. In the blink of an eye, another day passed. Dusk. The challenger had yet to appear. As for Zhongwen, he had entered level 6 once more. After a while, the formation patterns on level 6 lit up and everyone was invigorated. He made it. How long did Senior Brother Zhong take? I think it's more than an hour. But he still hasn't won. Yes, he was so close. Many Array Peak disciples sighed. Before long, Zhongwen was teleported out of the 10 Formations Pagoda and looked at the 10 Formations stele. The first row of the 10 Formations stele shone brightly. It was still his name, but the words at the back had changed. Zhongwen, cleared level 6 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. Took an hour and 15 minutes. Looking at the 10 Formations stele, Zhongwen frowned and asked to the side, that person hasn't come out yet. That's right. A disciple yawned and replied listlessly. The records on the 10 Formations stele would only change if one exited the 10 Formations Pagoda. The mysterious challenger had only taken an hour to clear level 6, and was even faster than Zhongwen. Now that the number 1 spot on the 10 Formations stele was still Zhongwen, it meant that the person was still in the 10 Formations Pagoda. That person lasted for so long in level 7? Zhongwen scoffed coldly internally. Let's see how long you can last. He took one last look at the 10 Formations stele before leaving once more. The difference between the two of them was only 15 minutes and wasn't huge. Zhongwen was confident that he could definitely surpass that person if he were to attempt the 10 Formations Pagoda again. Many Array Peak disciples could not hold on any longer. and chose to return for a night's rest before returning the next morning. However, there were still some disciples who were indignant and stayed on the spot, wanting to witness the person who had created the new record personally. Yet another night passed. The disciples guarding the 10 Formations Pagoda were all over the place. Some of them were already asleep while some of them would occasionally open their eyes and glance at the 10 Formations Pagoda instinctively. For the entire night, there was no movement from the 10 Formations Pagoda. The challenger did not appear either. Some of the disciples could not hold it in any longer, and went up to ask Elder Luo if the challenger was still around and who it was. Elder Luo merely shook his head, and did not reveal the identity of the person. However, he did state that the person was still in the 10 Formations Pagoda. That's strange. That person has already stayed in level 7 for an entire day and 2 nights. Why hasn't he come out yet? We're already exhausted from doing nothing outside. Yet, that person is still spending so much effort to dispel the formation. It's hard to imagine how he managed to last through it. Suddenly, a disciple asked, other than Senior Brother Zhong, didn't they say that there were 2 other people in the 10 Formations Pagoda? Why hasn't that person come out as well? Gradually, the discussions quietened down. Everyone's gazes flickered in bewilderment, as though they had thought of something extremely frightening. The fact that there were 2 people in the 10 Formations Pagoda was merely a guess. The reason was that no one believed that someone could dispel the killing formation of level 4 in such a short period of time. But now, everyone thought of a possibility that was closer to the truth. There was only one person in the 10 Formations Pagoda. The time this person took to clear the 4th level was really only a dozen or so breaths of time. It was also this person who had created a new record. The atmosphere in front of the 10 Formations Pagoda was strange. No one spoke, as though a pair of invisible hands were gripping their throats, causing them to feel suffocated. Right then, Zhongwen arrived once more and entered the 10 Formations Pagoda to challenge the pagoda once more, wanting to break the record of the mysterious challenger. This was already the morning of the 3rd day. For the past 3 days, news of what happened on Array Peak had gradually spread throughout the 5 peaks. Waves surged beneath the calm surface of the lake, threatening to burst forth. Chapter 106. Initially, the new record on the 10 Formation stele might not have attracted the attention of the trial disciples of the 5 peaks. That was because everyone knew that the new record was definitely created by Zhongwen and they were already used to it. However, when they heard that the new record was created by a mysterious disciple of unknown identity, it was enough to pique everyone's curiosity. Later on, news spread that Zhongwen had returned to challenge the pagoda once more, and had lost to the mysterious disciple once more. This was the 3rd time he had challenged the pagoda and the outcome was still unknown. The fight between 2 top geniuses of Array Peak was akin to the year-end face-off being brought forward. Even the 5 peak masters were curious, let alone the young trial disciples who loved to watch the fun. The number of people gathered before the 10 Formations Pagoda did not decrease. Instead, it increased. Apart from the disciples of Array Peak, disciples of the other 4 peaks were here as well, wanting to witness the final outcome. Led by Feng Haoyu, a group of Spirit Peak elites arrived from Spirit Peak. Little Fatty was among them as well. After not seeing him for 3 months, Little Fatty had already reached the peak of level 8 Qi condensation. Lung Ro's appearance caused a commotion as the gazes of most disciples landed on this icy beauty. In less than a year, there were already many who privately viewed Lung Ro as the #1 beauty of the 5 peaks. It wasn't just because of Lung Ro's beauty. It was also because of her strength. She was at the peak of level 9 Qi condensation just like Feng Haoyu. She was Feng Haoyu's greatest competitor for the year-end face-off. Not only that, Lung Ro had also displayed shocking talent in talismans. There was a high chance that Lung Ro would be the #1 of Talisman Peak's face-off as well. Disciples of Elixir and Talisman Peak rushed over. Shui Yi and the others from Weapon Peak also came to join in the fun. There were only 3 months left to the year-end face-off and the challenge of the 10 Formations Pagoda was probably the biggest event of the 5 peaks before the year-end face-off. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the 3rd day had passed. When dusk arrived, the formation patterns of level 5 of the 10 Formations Pagoda lit up, signifying that Zhongwen had entered level 6 once more. As long as Zhongwen could clear level 6 within an hour, he would regain the glory that belonged to him. Number 1 of Array Peak. Little Fatty squeezed through the crowd and came before Shui, asking softly, "Senior brother Shui, why haven't I seen my big brother recently? I haven't seen him in a while, but he should be fine." "Don't worry," Shui comforted. Little Fatty frowned and mumbled, "That's strange. I haven't seen anyone for 3 months, and there's no one in the cave either. I was thinking of helping Big Brother improve his sword fighting technique." Shui smiled without saying anything. In his opinion, Su Zimo might have realized that there was no hope of winning at the end of the year, so he found an excuse to leave. In this way, he could avoid the year-end face-off between the 5 peaks. Although he would inevitably be mocked, it was much better than being defeated in front of everyone. Suddenly, a blinding light burst forth from level 6 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. Success! How long will it take? It seems to have only been 3/4 of an hour, not even an hour. As expected of senior brother Zhong. After all, he has a strong foundation of formations to support him. The crowd discussed fervently. Some of the Array Peak disciples who were on good terms with Zhongwen heaved a sigh of relief. Before long, Zhongwen was teleported out of the 10 Formations Pagoda. At the same time, a bright light shone at the top of the 10 Formations stele as a line of words appeared. Zhongwen cleared level 6 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. 3/4 of an hour. Not bad, not bad. Elder Luo nodded with a smile. Senior Martial Brother Zhong, congratulations. Senior Brother Zhong is still the best. To think that he would have cleared level 6 so quickly. Some of the Array Peak disciples cupped their fists hurriedly. Feng Haoyu nodded to Zhongwen with his hands behind his back. Given Feng Haoyu's aloof personality and status in the 5 peaks, he was already giving Zhongwen enough face by showing such respect. Zhongwen smiled and raised his voice. "Everyone, please calm down." The noise in the crowd gradually subsided. "It's all thanks to everyone's concern that I'm able to return to the top of the 10 Formations stele today. However," changing the topic, Zhongwen pointed to the 10 Formations Pagoda in high spirits and declared loudly, "The person I'd like to thank the most is this unknown challenger. I've said before that his appearance forced me to be the strongest." Zhongwen hadn't finished speaking the word when his tone changed abruptly while his pupils constricted violently. It was as if he'd seen something that caused him to be extremely shocked. Everyone followed Zhongwen's finger. The light of level 7 of the 10 Formations Pagoda was already shining. It was a little blinding. Unknowingly, Elder Luo stood up and stared at level 7 of the 10 Formations Pagoda in a daze with disbelief in his eyes. The atmosphere before the 10 Formations Pagoda turned extremely strange. Nobody said anything. Everyone's gazes were drawn to the light of level 7 and they forgot to breathe, as though they had lost their souls. Zhongwen's expression changed a few times before turning ashen and his eyes dimmed. He had lost. He had lost completely. Earlier on, Zhongwen had tried to muster his courage and regain his confidence multiple times but failed each time. The flickering light of the formation patterns on the 7th level gave him a kind of pressure that others could not understand. It was a pressure known as despair. Among the disciples of the 5 peaks, there was probably no one who knew better than him about the intricacies of Grade 2 formations. The fact that the mysterious challenger had to spend 2 entire days and nights to clear level 7 was proof of that. However, that person had succeeded at the end of the day. As for Zhongwen, he had no clue about the illusory formation of level 7 and was bewitched by the illusions, unable to find any flaws in the formation. In fact, he could not even last 4 hours in the illusory formation of level 7. If he were to continue staying inside, there was a high chance that he would sink into it and suffer irrecoverable injuries. Heis! Sighing sadly, Zhongwen turned around and muttered to himself with a desolate expression, "There's no chance for me to surpass him." "You have a chance." Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded in Zhongwen's ears. Zhongwen raised his head. Unknowingly, Array Peak's master Xianyi had appeared and was standing not far away from him, looking at him with an encouraging smile. When he saw that gaze, Zhongwen shuddered and the haze in his heart dissipated as he saw the light once more. Taking a deep breath of air, Zhongwen nodded vigorously and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, master. I won't be defeated so easily. Zhongwen will definitely return." "Good. That's my disciple." Regaining his confidence, Zhongwen left the 10 formations pagoda once more. Xianyi looked at the gradually fading light of the formation pattern on the 7th floor, and a trace of curiosity flashed in his eyes. He floated to Elder Luo and set up a soundproof barrier with a wave of his hand. He asked, "Who's inside? Since when did Array Peak have such a person?" "That lad is not from Array Peak." Elder Luo laughed bitterly and shook his head. Frowning, Xianyi asked, "What's his name?" "Suzimo." Xianyi's heart skipped a beat as his expression turned strange. Noticing Xianyi's strange expression, Elder Luo asked instead, "Why? You know him? That name does sound familiar. I seem to have heard it somewhere before." Xianyi did not reply. As though he had thought of something fun, he chuckled. "This is going to be interesting." Chapter 107. Elder Luo was flustered as he urged, "Stop keeping us in suspense. Who is that lad?" "That's the lad who slashed me at the peak of the front mountain." Xianyi chuckled. "Him?" Elder Luo was enlightened. However, he was even more puzzled as he asked with a frown, "Hasn't that lad already challenged Feng Haoyu to a duel? He's causing a huge uproar and even wants to stop Feng Haoyu from getting #1 of elixir and weapon peaks. What does that have to do with Array Peak? If that lad can clear the 10 formations pagoda, he must have put in a lot of effort into formations. What's the meaning of him challenging the 10 formations pagoda instead of refining elixirs, weapons and raising his cultivation?" "I don't know either." Xianyi shook his head and chuckled. "But don't you find it interesting?" "It's useless even if it's interesting. He's not a seedling from Array Peak." Elder Luo sighed regretfully. Xianyi looked at the 10 formations pagoda meaningfully and said softly, "I'm curious as to how many levels that lad can clear." Night gradually descended. Many Array Peak disciples left one after another. However, those from the other 4 peaks were still waiting at the same spot, wondering who the challenger was. Little Fatty rolled his eyes and stopped a random Array Peak disciple, asking with a grin, "Senior brother, why aren't you guys waiting?" "Heh, junior brother, you're inexperienced." That person replied mysteriously, "Think about it. Even if you wait here for an entire night, you might not be able to meet that person. You can just come back tomorrow morning. Furthermore, even if that person can clear level 8, he'll have to spend at least 2 days and nights." Little Fatty nodded in agreement. "You're smart, senior brother. That makes sense. If that mysterious challenger took 2 days and nights to clear level 7, it would definitely take him a long time to clear level 8 as well." With that thought in mind, Little Fatty went back to rest. For the next 2 days, there was no movement from the 10 formations pagoda. Gradually, the disciples from the various peaks lost their patience and left. On the morning of the 6th day, Zhongwen arrived at the 10 formations pagoda once more to challenge it. As night fell, Zhongwen was teleported out of the 10 formations pagoda. This time round he cleared level 6 faster than before. However, he still failed at level 7. Just as Zhongwen was about to leave, the 8th level's array pattern lit up. 8th floor. This person has passed the 8th level. A full 3 days and 3 nights. In that case, this person has already been inside for 6 days. What kind of body does this person have to be able to withstand such consumption? In fact, most of the disciples did not know that Suzimo's physique was far more terrifying than they had imagined. Furthermore, back in the Weapon Peak cave abode, Suzimo was tormented by Little Crane to the point where he did not sleep for 10 days straight. It could be said that Suzimo's achievements in the field of formations were all due to a stupid bird. Looking at the flickering radiance on level 8 of the 10 formations pagoda, Zhongwen's lips were bitter. He no longer had any hope. The difference was too great. Looking at the familiar name on the first row of the 10 formations stele, Zhongwen found it a little irritating and could not help but laugh self-deprecatingly before turning to leave. Looking at Zhongwen's back view, Elder Luo shook his head and sighed. What a pity. If he hadn't met this person, Zhongwen would have been a decent formation genius. This time round, the disciples of the various peaks had more or less figured out the timing of the 10 formations pagoda. Based on that, the mysterious challenger would take an even longer time to clear level 9. Since the year-end face-off was approaching, the disciples naturally wouldn't waste their time here. Furthermore, it was already late at night and everyone left one after another, returning to their cave abodes to rest. Before long, the 10 Formations Pagoda regained its peace and Elder Luo was the only one left guarding the entrance. Standing up, he stretched his limbs and stretched. Xianyi walked over from afar and said, "Elder Luo, go and rest. That lad is at level 9 now, and shouldn't be doing anything for the next few days." Elder Luo shook his head. "Why? You're still worried?" Xianyi smiled. "If you're worried, I'll stand guard for you for the entire night." Suddenly, Elder Luo revealed a mysterious smile and asked, "Do you know what type of formation level 9 is?" "A killing formation," Xianyi was puzzled, not knowing why Elder Luo would ask that. Elder Luo asked again, "Do you know how long Su Zimo took to clear level 4's killing formation?" This time round, Xianyi's eyes shone brightly as he guessed, 15 minutes? Elder Luo chuckled and kept him in suspense before saying slowly, 17 breaths. "Pust!" Xianyi's expression changed as he gasped and exclaimed, "How is that possible?" After a moment of silence, Xianyi probed, "Could it be a coincidence?" Elder Luo gazed at the 10 Formations Pagoda and said softly, "We'll find out soon." All of a sudden, the moment Elder Luo said that, the light of level 9 lit up the night skies. Xianyi and Elder Luo exchanged glances and could see the shock in each other's eyes. How long did he take this time round? About 47 breaths. Seems like this lad does have a way of clearing killing formations. Level 10 is a combination formation that is made up of any combination of illusion, trap and killing formations. If one of them is a killing formation, this combination formation will be much easier for this lad. If he can clear level 10, Su Zimo, who had just entered level 10, did not know that his challenge would cause such a huge commotion for Array Peak and even the 5 peaks. For Su Zimo, he had gained a lot from this challenge. Previously, he was immersed in his research in the Array Chamber. After all, he was just building a cart behind closed doors without any practical experience. But in the 10 Formations Pagoda, Su Zimo had witnessed the methods and formations of many Array formation masters and benefited immensely. Standing at level 10, Su Zimo smiled after sensing it carefully. The combination formation this time round was made up of a trap and a killing formation. To him, the killing formation was nothing and the only thing he had to clear was a trap formation. "My luck is pretty good this time round." There was a deep fatigue in Su Zimo's brows, but his eyes were still clear and resolute. For the entire 6 days, Su Zimo had not rested at all and had been clearing formations the entire time. Even though he did not expend much spirit chi, he was physically and mentally exhausted. Clearing formations was way too taxing on one's mental state. However, at the thought that he would no longer have to worry about that stupid bird after clearing this place, Su Zimo was instantly cheered up. Pulling himself together, he began to clear the formations. 8th day midnight. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Apart from Elder Luo, there was no one else in front of the 10 Formations Pagoda. Just as Elder Luo was about to doze off, the formation pattern at the top of the 10 Formations Pagoda lit up without any warning. Elder Luo was invigorated as he looked at the formation pattern light in silence for a long time. According to the time that Su Zimo had spent in the 10 Formations Pagoda, he was still 6 hours away from clearing level 10. That was a total of 8 days. Such a long challenge was not only a test of a cultivator's ability to set up and clear formations, it was also a test of their willpower, stamina, mental state, etc. Elder Luo was heartened. It was as though he was looking at a monster in Array formation slowly revealing his brilliance in a corner of Tianhuang mainland, in the mountain peak that he was guarding. Chapter 108. Level 10 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. The moment Su Zimo broke out of the formation, he caught sight of a man in white robes with his hands behind his back. His black hair was draped casually over his shoulders, fluttering gently in the breeze. The white-robed man stood at the entrance of the pagoda with his back facing Su Zimo, as though he was one with the night sky. Even though he could not see the man's appearance, Su Zimo's gaze shifted and he caught sight of a mysterious hexagonal pattern on the man's sleeves. Array Peaks Master Xianyi. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. Illusion? Could it be that level 10 wasn't made up of 2 types of formations but 3? There was an illusion formation after the killing and trapping formations? This isn't an illusion. You've already cleared the 10 formations pagoda. Right then Xianyi's voice sounded. It was warm and calm, as though he had guessed Su Zimo's thoughts. Some of the more powerful array formation masters were experts in games, and could deduce the thoughts of others through clues. Even though he heard Xianyi's reply, Su Zimo did not let his guard down. After all, the exact same scene would appear in an illusion and it would be difficult to differentiate between reality and illusion. Su Zimo stood on the spot for a long time and cupped his fists when he could not sense the aura of the formation pattern. Greetings, Peak Master. Xianyi did not turn back and asked, How long have you been learning about formations? 3 months. Su Zimo did not hide anything. A shocking glint flashed through Xianyi's eyes before disappearing quickly. 3 months, 3 months. Xianyi murmured repeatedly. After a long time, he turned slightly and nodded at Su Zimo with a smile. Come stand beside me. Slightly stunned, Su Zimo walked forward and stood beside Xianyi. You must be exhausted, right? Xianyi asked with a smile. Su Zimo nodded. At that moment, he only wanted to return to his cave abode and sleep till the skies turned dark without caring about anything else. I've heard about your battle with Feng Haoyu as well. You don't have much time to begin with. Why did you come here to learn array formations? Xianyi was curious. The image of that silly bird flashed through Su Zimo's mind. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. There's a reason for this. It's hard to explain. There's less than 3 months to the year-end face-off. I'm not too concerned about refining pills and weapons. However, I heard that you're going to fight Feng Haoyu after the face-off? Xianyi asked again. Yes. Are you confident? Su Zimo hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. No. If it wasn't for the fact that he was worried about being discovered, Su Zimo naturally had great confidence. However, Su Zimo was still far behind when it came to cultivation methods. Xianyi said in a low voice, Actually, the killing techniques of Qi refinement warriors are relatively simple. This is because the spirit energy in the Dantian is limited. Even at the great perfection of Qi condensation, the sea of Qi in the Dantian was still in the state of spirit Qi. It's only after advancing to foundation establishment cultivators that their spirit energy can transform into liquid, that they can release all sorts of powerful spirit arts. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly recalled that back when he was hunted down by Joyful Clan, there were a few foundation establishment cultivators who used some strange techniques such as earth entrapment and wood entanglement that caused him a lot of trouble. Those must be the spirit arts that Xianyi was talking about. The killing of Qi refinement warriors is nothing more than sword-wielding techniques. Xianyi said, in terms of sword-wielding techniques, Ethereal Sword is one of the 3 secret skills of Misty Peak. It's extremely famous in the cultivation world of Tianhuang mainland and is ranked at the top. As for Feng Haoyu, he has already cultivated Ethereal Sword. Su Zimo could tell what Xianyi was implying. In other words, he had no chance of winning against Feng Haoyu, who had already cultivated Ethereal Sword. The night was hazy and the moon was sparse as the 2 of them stood at the top of the 10 formations pagoda. One of them was dressed in white robes with an elegant bearing, while the other was dressed in green robes with delicate features. If any trial disciples of the 5 peaks were to catch sight of this, their jaws would definitely drop. The 5 peak masters were all perfected Jin Dan. What sort of status did they have in the sect? For a mere trial disciple who was only at level 6 Qi condensation to be able to chat with a Ray Peak's master, such treatment was enough to make anyone envious. When he saw that Su Zimo was silent, Xianyi continued, Initially, I didn't want to tell you all this. But since you've already cleared the 10 formations pagoda, I can point you in the right direction. Whether or not you succeed will depend on yourself. Thank you, Peak Master. Delighted. Su Zimo bowed hurriedly in gratitude. Xianyi said slowly, apart from the fixed secret skills, there's another way to raise a cultivator's combat strength. Sword formations. Sword formations? Su Zimo furrowed his brows in deep thought. In the array chamber, he had once chanced upon a bamboo scroll called the tripartite sword formation. Xianyi continued, most array formation masters have weak combat strength. That's because they won't give you a lot of time to set up your formation before charging in foolishly. However, there's a special branch amongst array formation masters, sword formation masters. The prerequisite to becoming a sword formation master is to first be an array formation master. and have a deep understanding of formations. Secondly, you'll have to cultivate a sword formation. Su Zimo nodded. Xianyi continued, sword formation manuals are extremely rare, and there are only 2 types of sword formations in the sect. One is the tripartite sword formation and the other is the hexagonal sword formation. The former is a grade 1 formation while the latter is a grade 2 formation. The activation of a sword formation is, in truth, an array formation master uses the remnant marks left behind by flying swords to replace the formation patterns. From there, a massive formation can be formed and release immense power. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Just setting up formation patterns was already extremely difficult for array formation masters, and the slightest mistake would cause the formation to fail. Furthermore, the remnant marks left behind by flying swords were used to replace the formation patterns. Xianyi continued, there are extremely few sword formation masters in the cultivation world because the requirements are way too harsh. Every single sword formation master is a paragon amongst array formation masters, and their understanding of formations far surpasses everyone else. Furthermore, sword formations usually require multiple flying swords, and it's already extremely difficult to control multiple flying swords in battle, let alone activate the sword formation. Su Zimo nodded. For example, the tripartite sword formation required 3 flying swords. However, the hexagonal sword formation seemed to require 6 flying swords by the looks of it. Also, controlling multiple flying swords will consume even more spirit chi. If the formation fails, the sword formation master will have expended his spirit chi for nothing, and he'll be placed in an even more dangerous situation. Xianyi smiled once more. Furthermore, where can ordinary array formation masters get their hands on so many flying swords? There aren't many trial disciples in our sect who can even possess an inferior grade flying sword, let alone 3, 6 or even more. Can't we use flying swords of other grades as replacements? Su Zimo asked. No. Xianyi shook his head. You must know that the flying swords used to create a sword formation must all be of the same grade. They must all be inferior grade or middle grade flying swords. If the grades are different, the formation patterns left behind by the flying swords in the void will be different and the formation will definitely fail. Chapter 109. Of course, if the flying swords that make up the sword formation are identical in terms of size, weight and sharpness, it'll be easier to control and set it up. Pausing for a moment, Xianyi chuckled. However, that's not very realistic. Unless all the flying swords were created by the same weapon refinement master, and it's a set of flying swords specially created by that weapon refinement master. A set of flying swords? Su Zimo's eyes flickered as he pondered. You're a disciple of Weapon Peak. Even though you haven't become a weapon refinement master, you should know how complicated the art of weapon refinement is. It's already difficult to refine a single graded spirit weapon, let alone a set. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He did not dare to say anything else, but it wouldn't be too difficult for him to refine a set of inferior grade flying swords that were almost identical. Of course, I know that this isn't an easy path and this train of thought might not be able to help you defeat Feng Haoyu after the Spirit Peak face-off. After all, there's less than 3 months to the end of the year. It's too short a time, Xianyi said with anticipation. However, you're the most talented array formation master I've ever seen. Perhaps you can work hard in this direction, and become a true sword formation master in the future. Peak Master, are you a sword formation master? Su Zimo suddenly asked. I'm the only sword formation master in the sect. Xianyi nodded with a smile. It was only then that Su Zimo understood that Xianyi was waiting for him to say those words because he wanted to find a successor for the sect to become a sword formation master. Retrieving a scroll from his storage bag, Xianyi handed it to Su Zimo. I'm sure you've seen the tripartite sword formation in the array chamber. This is the hexagonal sword formation. Burn it after memorizing it and don't spread it out. Su Zimo received it with both hands and nodded. Xianyi pondered for a moment before continuing. Zimo, don't worry about a momentary success or failure. There's still a long way to go. Su Zimo knew that Xianyi was worried that he would lose to Feng Haoyu at the end of the year, and suffer a blow to his confidence. In reality, it wasn't just Xianyi. The other 4 Peak Masters, including everyone from Misty Peak, did not think highly of Su Zimo. If they were to compete in artifact forging or alchemy, it would be hard to say who would emerge victorious. But if the two of them were to fight, then in the eyes of everyone, the outcome was already predetermined, and Su Zimo would only be seeking his own humiliation. Of course, in Misty Peak, there was another existence who thought highly of Su Zimo. However, this existence wasn't a single person. Go, time is precious. Spend more time on alchemy and weapon refinement and strive to get first place in these two peaks. Xianyi instructed again. Su Zimo nodded and put away the bamboo scroll of the hexagonal sword formation. Summoning his flying sword, he left the 10 Formations Pagoda and disappeared into the night. The moment Su Zimo left the 10 Formations Pagoda, the names on the 10 Formations stele changed and moved down a row, leaving an empty spot at the top. Zhong Wen's previous record had been pushed to the second row. There was a line of words on the first row of the 10 Formations stele. Cleared level 10 of the 10 Formations Pagoda, 7 days and 18 hours. However, at the place where the name was displayed, it was completely blank. Right then, Xianyi descended from the 10 Formations Pagoda and caught sight of that by accident. Slightly stunned, he murmured, "That lad must have forgotten to place his sect badge on the 10 Formations stele from exhaustion." Elder Luo was stunned for a moment before realizing. I forgot to tell him about that. After clearing the pagoda, the name of the challenger would only be recorded by making contact with the 10 Formations stele with their sect badge. For the past 3 months, Su Zimo buried himself in the vast ancient scrolls of the array chamber without being distracted at all. Neither did he interact with the other array peak disciples. He didn't even know what the 10 Formation stele was used for, let alone this matter. Before the challenge, Su Zimo did not think too much when he saw the gigantic stele erected here and entered without asking. When Elder Luo saw that Su Zimo was merely a disciple of Weapon Peak, he thought that the latter was merely here to join in the fun and did not mention anything about the latter leaving his name on the 10 Formation stele. Should I go chase him back? Elder Luo soared into the air, wanting to chase after Su Zimo and inform him of the matter. Xianyi waved it off and shook his head. Forget it. That lad hasn't slept for the past 8 days. Let him rest well. I'll look for him tomorrow then? Elder Luo asked. Pondering for a moment, Xianyi replied, "We'll talk about it after the 5 peaks face-off. Help him keep this a secret for now." Needless to say, this will definitely cause an uproar in the 5 peaks. If the other disciples find out that he was the one who cleared the 10 Formations Pagoda, there will definitely be trouble. Yes, that's good too. Elder Luo nodded. There's less than 3 months to the end of the year. Don't let this affect his cultivation. The two of them chatted casually for a while more before leaving the place. Elder Luo could finally rest in peace as well. Peace was restored in front of the 10 Formations Pagoda. The disciples of the 5 peaks who were sleeping and resting did not realize that a new line of words had appeared on the 10 Formation stele overnight. Yu Ping was an array peak disciple. According to his habit for the past few days, he would run to the 10 Formation stele early in the morning to take a look before doing anything else. This morning, Yu Ping arrived on his sword and circled around the 10 Formations Pagoda. Sweeping his gaze across the 10 Formations stele, he retracted it. Yes, there's no change. Yu Ping murmured softly. There were a total of 100 lines on the 10 Formations stele and at first glance, there was indeed no change. All of a sudden, Yu Ping's expression changed as he spun around and glared at the first row of words on the 10 Formations stele. His eyes widened and his pupils constricted. It had changed. There was a change in the 10 Formations stele. Senior brother Zhong was pushed to the second row. The names on the first row, What did that mean? It was blank? Yu Ping was stunned. Blinking his eyes, he looked again. Indeed, the place for the names was blank. Landing on the ground, Yu Ping walked closer and rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, it was still blank. There was no name for the challenger? Yu Ping subconsciously looked back. His mouth was agape, and his eyes were filled with shock. Cleared level 10 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. Took 7 days and 18 hours. That line of words had Yu Ping dumbfounded. Yu Ping did not move at all and was completely stunned. His mind was in a mess as he muttered subconsciously, Cleared level 10, cleared level 10. Junior brother Yu, why are you here so early in the morning? Someone greeted him from behind, but Yu Ping did not seem to hear it. What are you doing here? Did you go crazy from looking at the 10 formation stele? An array peak disciple who rushed over patted Yu Ping on the shoulder and teased him before looking over. That look froze the smile on that person's face. After an unknown period of time, a shriek tore through the air and woke up countless array peak disciples who were still in deep sleep. He cleared it. He cleared it. The mysterious challenger has passed the 10th level of the formation. In less than an hour, the news spread through the 5 peaks. It was earth-shattering. Chapter 110. This day, the 5 peaks were in an uproar as countless trial disciples swarmed towards Array Peak. Not only that, even more than half of Misty Peak's inner sect disciples rushed over upon hearing the news. Logically speaking, the birth of a new record on the 10 formation stele shouldn't cause such a huge commotion. However, it was said that not only was the record broken, it was broken all the way. There were only 10 levels in the 10 formations pagoda, and the challenger had cleared all of them. Before long, many sect disciples gathered before the 10 formations pagoda. In the distant skies, more and more disciples were arriving on their flying swords. Feng Haoyu, Lung Ro, Little Fatty and the others from Spirit Peak were among them. Shui Yi and the others from Weapon Peak rushed over as well. Zhongwen looked at the first row of words on the 10 formation stele with a conflicted expression. If he had known that this would happen, he wouldn't have challenged the pagoda repeatedly in hopes of surpassing this person. Their understanding of formations wasn't on the same level at all. He can be considered an intermediate array formation master after clearing level 10 of the 10 formations pagoda. He's an intermediate array formation master at Qi condensation realm. That's way too incredible. Not only is this record unprecedented, no one will be able to surpass it in the future. It's been close to 8 days and he hasn't eaten or slept at all. I wonder how he managed to get through it. The fact that the challenger did not leave his name piqued everyone's curiosity and led to countless guesses. Just who is that person? That mysterious challenger did not leave his name. I'm guessing there's a deeper meaning behind it. No one could guess why Su Zimo did not leave his name. It was because he did not know the use of the 10 formation stele or how to leave his name on it. Could it be Senior Brother Liu? Other than Senior Brother Zhong, Senior Brother Liu is the most skilled in formations in Array Peak. I've seen Senior Brother Liu the past few days. It can't be him. Could it be Senior Brother Zhong? He hasn't appeared for the past few days. It might be him. I heard that Senior Brother Zhong only left after taking on a sect mission. Everyone discussed fervently with all sorts of guesses. I'm guessing that this senior brother must be a true genius hidden within our Array Peak. He's handsome and suave. Most importantly, he's indifferent to fame and fortune. A female disciple of Array Peak mumbled to herself with a smitten look in her eyes, completely immersed in her own fantasy. I'm guessing that he's trying to reveal his identity at the Array Peak face-off at the end of the year to shock everyone. Another disciple guessed. The many disciples gathered here all had looks of admiration in their eyes. Passing level 10 of the 10 formations pagoda meant that one could set up grade 2 arrays. On the other hand, the geniuses of Elixir Peak and Talisman Peak could only refine Tier 1 elixirs or Tier 1 talismans. In Weapon Peak, no one could even craft an inferior grade spirit weapon. From that perspective, this mysterious challenger had already surpassed all the trial disciples of the 5 peaks. In the crowd, Feng Haoyu suddenly chuckled and shook his head. The Tao of formations is just a side path after all. In the cultivation world, one's true capabilities are still important in life and death situations. With that, Feng Haoyu led the group of Spirit Peak disciples away. What's there to be cocky about? He's just relying on his fighting prowess. What's so great about that? That's right. If that mysterious senior brother had set up an array beforehand and let him in, he would have had no choice but to surrender obediently. Listen to that sour tone. Number 1 of Spirit Peak? He doesn't have any magnanimity at all. Many Array Peak disciples were displeased as they looked at Feng Haoyu's back view and mocked him. In the hearts of many Array Peak disciples, Feng Haoyu's disdain towards this mysterious challenger was equivalent to his disdain towards Array Peak and them. Furthermore, even though the Tao of formations was a side path, it was extremely important. While a sect might not be strong, if a powerful array formation master were to set up an array outside the sect, they would be able to defend against powerful enemies. Therefore, in the cultivation world, some sects with powerful array formation masters would find it difficult to be taken down by external enemies. Way too strong. Way too strong. Little Fatty rubbed his meaty palms and mumbled, "It's such a pity if I don't befriend such a ferocious person. Just who is he?" Lung Ro's gaze lingered on the 10 formation steel for a long time before she nodded. Amazing. With that, Lung Ro left Array Peak as well. When the disciples around Lung Ro heard that, they could not help but shriek. Lung Ro was a loner of few words, and even a genius like Feng Haoyu had not received such an evaluation from her. Now that she said that word, it was clear how shocked Lung Ro was. Little Fatty's eyes widened as he scanned the crowd for a long time, as though he was looking for someone. After a while he found nothing. Frowning, Little Fatty murmured, "Where has bro been all this time? He didn't even come to take a look when something so big happened in Array Peak? No, I've got to check out Weapon Peak again." Making up his mind, Little Fatty rose into the air on his sword and sped towards Weapon Peak. Far away in midair, 5 perfected Jin Dan stood in the air, looking at the rare commotion on Array Peak. The 5 of them were the 5 Peak Masters. Who is the intruder? Even I'm curious, Elixir Peak's master, the brown-haired youth, said in an old-fashioned manner. The other 4 looked at Xian Yi. When Xian chuckled, "Speak. I don't believe that you don't know the identity of that lad as Array Peak's master." Xian Yi placed his hands behind his back and smiled without saying anything. "Stop keeping us in suspense. Hurry and speak." Talisman Peak's master, a cold woman, hollered with a sullen expression. Xian Yi's smile froze on his face. "Ha." The disheveled old man clapped and laughed. "Chishan is going to get really angry. You're going to suffer if she throws a bunch of talismans at your face." "No, she won't." The brown-haired youth shook his head in a serious manner. "Chishan can't bear to attack Xian Yi." Blushing, Chishan glared at the disheveled old man and the brown-haired youth before snarling, "Damned old fogies. Nothing good comes out of a dog's mouth." Xian Yi had an awkward expression as he looked at Chishan carefully and coughed gently. "I really can't say that." When Xian was puzzled. "That's strange. How special is that lad's identity that you can't say?" Xian Yi shook his head and remained silent. The disheveled old man waved it off. "Forget it, don't make things difficult for him." Pausing for a moment, the disheveled old man could not help but tease, "Xian Yi, you're pretty good. You managed to groom such a genius of formations without anyone noticing. You've got some skills." "Humph, he must have spent a lot of time and effort on that lad," Chishan harumphed softly. Xian Yi chuckled. "That's not the case. He's a self-taught genius." Self-taught genius? The 4 Peak Masters exchanged glances, feeling even more shocked. It was truly unbelievable that someone could clear the 10 formations pagoda on their own without the guidance of a powerful array formation master. "Now that you mention it, we're even more curious," when Xian chuckled bitterly. Xian Yi pondered for a moment. "Don't worry, that lad's identity won't be hidden. Everyone will know about it sooner or later." Chapter 111. Weapon Peak. Little Fatty arrived at the entrance of Su Zimo's cave abode. The door of the cave abode had long been destroyed by Little Crane, but Su Zimo did not bother to fix it. Little Fatty looked inside and saw a green-robed man snoring on a stone bed while a fierce-looking Linghu stood guard beside him. Little Fatty's eyes lit up as he withdrew his flying sword and charged in. When the Linghu caught sight of Little Fatty, it growled softly without showing any hostility. It naturally knew that Little Fatty was Su Zimo's friend. If anyone else had barged in as such, the Linghu would have stood in front of Su Zimo long ago. Bro, wake up!" Little Fatty yelled before he even got close. Even though Su Zimo was in a deep sleep, he had already woken up instinctively the moment Little Fatty barged in. Shaking his groggy head, Su Zimo sat up and blinked his sleepy eyes, stretching his limbs. "Bro, where have you been for the past 3 months? Why haven't I seen you around?" Little Fatty asked. Su Zimo replied nonchalantly, "I went out for a walk to relieve my boredom." Little Fatty rolled his eyes and grumbled, "Bro, you sure are carefree. The 5 Peaks face-off is right around the corner and you're still going to relieve your boredom?" Pausing for a moment, Little Fatty leaned in front of Su Zimo and said mysteriously, Bro, something big happened in the sect recently. Haven't you heard? Ah, confused, Su Zimo shook his head. I'm not sure. Bro, do you know that there's a 10 Formations pagoda in Array Peak? I do. The 10 Formations pagoda was completely destroyed by a mysterious disciple. Su Zimo's heart trembled, and he became a little more spirited. He frowned and asked, how did you know? It's not just me. All the trial disciples in the 5 Peaks know about it. It wouldn't be long before this matter would spread throughout the entire sect. There are so many people gathered on Array Peak now, all waiting to watch the show. Su Zimo was shocked. He didn't expect that his unintentional action would actually cause such a big commotion. Could it be that Elder Luo and First Seat Xianyi had spread the news? No. On second thought, Su Zimo asked, what do you mean by a mysterious disciple? No one knows who passed the 10 Formations pagoda? He. The little fatty smiled mysteriously and said with a smile, that's the most amazing part. That disciple did not leave his name on the 10 Formations stele after challenging the formation. The disciples of the 5 Peaks are all trying to guess his identity. 10 Formations stele? Su Zimo blinked and vaguely recalled that there seemed to be a tall stone stele beside the 10 Formations pagoda that was filled with words. What do you mean by leaving one's name on the 10 Formations stele? Su Zimo asked again. Little Fatty explained the use of the 10 Formations stele and explained, after challenging the pagoda, one has to make contact with the 10 Formations stele with their sect badge for it to record the name of the challenger. Su Zimo froze for a moment and muttered to himself, so there's such a thing. That incredible person cleared all 10 levels of the formation in a single breath and left. How admirable! Little Fatty's eyes were filled with admiration, as though he was looking at an extraordinary cultivator who left with a flick of his sleeves. In reality, Su Zimo was already on the brink of collapsing that night and barely managed to return on his sword. There was no way he could be described as suave. Little Fatty noticed that Su Zimo was a little distracted and did not seem to be in high spirits. Hence, he tugged at Su Zimo's arm and said, bro, let's go. Come with me to Array Peak and you'll know how amazing that person is. Su Zimo avoided Little Fatty's palm seamlessly and shook his head. I'm not going. Su Zimo did not have much time to begin with, and he had spent 3 months on Array Peak without refining elixirs, raising his cultivation realm or practicing sword wielding. There were less than 3 months until the end of the year. How could he be in the mood to watch the show? Furthermore, Su Zimo was not curious about the mysterious challenger at all, even if he was the one who had challenged the formation. At the same time, Su Zimo realized that he would be in trouble if word of this got out. As such, he decided to keep it a secret for the time being. Bro, there's a huge crowd on Array Peak right now and it's an unprecedented scene. It'll be a pity if you don't go take a look. Little Fatty refused to give up and persuaded once more. Su Zimo smiled and replied casually, I know a little about formations as well. It's nothing much for me to clear it. That was something that Su Zimo said casually, but Little Fatty was displeased on the spot. Bang! Little Fatty's chubby palm slammed heavily on Su Zimo's stone bed with a dull thud. Su Zimo was stunned. Bro, I don't like what you're saying. Little Fatty retracted his smile and said with an unprecedentedly stern expression, that mysterious disciple might not be as good as you in terms of weapon refinement. However, you can't look down on him like that, bro. What do you mean by it's nothing much for me to clear it? Do you know what it means to be able to clear level 10 of the 10 Formations pagoda? Su Zimo asked instinctively, what does it mean? Little Fatty was stunned by Su Zimo's question. After a long time, his face flushed red, but he still could not figure out what it meant. Of course, Little Fatty was not truly angry. He was merely indignant and wanted to fight for justice for the mysterious challenger. Looking at Little Fatty's embarrassed expression, Su Zimo could not help but chuckle. Actually, I'm that mysterious disciple. Bro, stop fooling around. Little Fatty waved his hand and interrupted. Su Zimo. Little Fatty said in a deep voice, Bro, you have to know that for so many years, generation after generation of trial disciples, there have been so many geniuses. However, the highest record is only clearing level 6. Look at that Feng Haoyu. He seems to be doing well now, but it's not like there haven't been any geniuses with wind spirit roots in the sect. He's just one of them. However, This mysterious disciple is the first to clear level 10 of the 10 Formations Pagoda in thousands of years. Su Zimo could only nod his head in agreement. Bro, think about it. Back then you made it through the 8 Distresses formation and blew up the spirit testing gate. Wasn't that amazing? In reality, this mysterious disciple's current achievements are the same as yours, unprecedented. Little Fatty put on a straight face and said earnestly, Big brother, you have to be humble. You have to be open-minded. You can't look down on others so easily. How can you do that? Alright, I got it. I'll go take a look when I have time. Su Zimo was sweating profusely. When he saw that Little Fatty had no intention of stopping, he changed the topic hurriedly. I haven't cultivated for a long time. I've got to make the best use of my time to raise my cultivation realm. Little Fatty used his spirit-peering art and scanned Su Zimo. He was still at level 6 chi condensation? Little Fatty lamented bitterly, Bro, look at you. You were already at level 6 chi condensation 3 months ago. It's been 3 months and your cultivation hasn't improved at all. What are you going to use to fight against Feng Haoyu? Bro, even if you know that you can't win, you have to pull yourself together and not give up on yourself. Cultivation is like sailing against the current. You'll fall behind if you don't advance. You've wasted 3 months just like that. What do you want me to say about you? Sigh. Su Zimo. Chapter 112. After much effort, Su Zimo finally sent Little Fatty away. Arriving at the entrance of his cave abode, he squatted on the ground and focused on setting up a formation. Su Zimo was setting up a grade 2 trap formation called the Smoke Formation. Because of the special identity of the stupid bird, Su Zimo did not dare to set up a killing formation. It was enough for him to set up a trap formation to restrain the stupid bird, so that it would not disturb him. Ling Hu watched from the side. Even though he was puzzled, he could tell that Su Zimo must have found a way to restrain the stupid bird upon his return. He had been gone for more than 3 months, which was quite a long time. It took an entire day for Su Zimo to finish setting up the smoke formation. Su Zimo had no intention of stopping as he continued setting up a grade 2 soundproof formation outside the smoke formation. That way, no matter how the stupid bird cried from within the formation, it would not affect Su Zimo. Thereafter, Su Zimo left a mark on the spirit beast badge around Ling Hu's neck, so that Ling Hu could enter and leave the cave abode freely. By the time everything was set up, it was already dark. Su Zimo gazed at the night sky outside without the slightest bit of drowsiness. There were less than 3 months to the end of the year face-off and he did not have much time left. According to the original plan, Su Zimo could have used sufficient spirit stones to raise his cultivation realm to perfected chi condensation by the end of the year. But now that he had spent so much time on Array Peak, Su Zimo would only be able to reach level 9 chi condensation at most by the end of the year. After all, Su Zimo had not made much progress in terms of elixir refinement. Even without the reminder, Su Zimo knew that he had no chance of winning against perfected chi condensation Feng Haoyu at level 9 chi condensation. Furthermore, Feng Haoyu had cultivated one of the 3 secret skills of the sect, Ethereal Sword. Su Zimo's only chance of victory lay in the 2 sword formation bamboo scrolls. He had to master the 3 talents and 6 direction sword formations before the 5 peaks face-off, so that he could become a sword formation master. Su Zimo did not sleep for the entire night. He took out his alchemy furnace and began to refine pills. Previously, Su Zimo had a chance to refine a grade 1 elixir, but its grade was unknown. However, he was interrupted by Little Crane midway, causing the elixir to explode and his efforts to fail. Having not refined pills for 3 months, Su Zimo's technique was clearly a lot rusty. The temperature of the flame was not controlled accurately enough, and the spirit herbs were continuously burned to ashes. In the latter half of the night, Su Zimo finally found the feeling and gradually entered a good state. After failing many times in the middle, Su Zimo finally succeeded in refining a furnace of pills in the early hours of the morning. Normally there would be 9 pills in a cauldron. However, the more complicated the pill formula was, the more difficult it would be to refine the pill. In the end, the number of pills that could be refined would also decrease. For example, the Foundation Establishment pill, which was the most difficult pill to concoct among Tier 1 pills, could only be concocted once. As for the Spirit Gathering pill, It was the most ordinary of Tier 1 pills. 9 spirit-gathering pills burst forth from the pores of the elixir furnace and hovered in midair. There were actually 3 elixir patterns on the 8 pills. They were all superior-grade pills. One of the pills even had 4 elixir patterns on it. It was a supreme-grade pill. Su Zimo looked at the 9 spirit-gathering pills floating in front of him and his gaze flickered in deep thought. It was truly beyond Su Zimo's expectations for the first batch of pills to be of such quality. Elixir refinement was different from weapon refinement. In the path of weapon refinement, the flame was the foundation. However, the true core was still tempering and spirit gathering. However, the true core of elixir refinement was the refinement of the essence of the elixir twice. The more thorough the refinement, the lesser the impurities in the elixir, and the better the quality of the elixir in the end. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. With a whoosh, a scarlet flame burned on the fingertip of his right hand. The only explanation for why he could refine such high-quality elixirs was because of the level 3 spirit fire before him. Su Zimo could vaguely sense that the level 3 spirit fire on his right hand was different from ordinary level 3 spirit fires. It seemed to have a unique advantage in terms of refining spirit herbs. In that case, as long as he continued practicing, grasping the temperature of the flame accurately and familiarizing himself with the ratio of spirit herbs, it was not impossible for him to refine perfect elixirs. Could it be that my flame is not a level 3 spirit fire and is merely of the same color as a level 3 spirit fire? Su Zimo looked at his right hand repeatedly and fell into deep thought. Right then, a familiar cry of a crane could be heard from outside the cave abode. Caw-caw! Ling Hu shuddered and jumped up in fright. The hair on his back stood on end and his eyes were filled with shock. Even though 3 months had passed, Ling Hu still had lingering fears. It was clear how tormented he was by Little Crane during that period of time. It's finally here. Su Zimo smiled gently and looked at Little Crane that was descending from the skies calmly. Little Crane flapped its wings smugly and looked at Su Zimo with a mocking gaze. It meant to say that even if you hide for 3 months, you'll have to return sooner or later. You won't be able to escape from my palms. The moment Little Crane landed at the entrance of the cave abode, a bedazzling light shone from the ground. The light of the formation pattern shone brightly. The smoke net formation was activated. Caw! Little Crane's expression changed and its eyes were filled with panic. It wanted to soar into the air but realized that no matter how it flew, it could not fly out of this small region before it. It was trapped. Little Crane grew up on Misty Peak and naturally knew the methods of many cultivators. It realized that it might have been trapped in a formation. Caw-caw! Little Crane was enraged and its cry was loud and clear. However, it reverberated within the soundproof formation and could not be sent out. Within the cave abode, Ling Hu could not help but grin when he saw Little Crane opening its mouth but not making a single sound. He hopped around excitedly on the spot. He finally got to see that stupid bird take a beating. To think that you'll have a day like this too. I'll have my revenge. Ling Hu reared his head and howled into the skies, releasing the anger in his chest. Little Crane was even more enraged when it saw Ling Hu's provocation. It stood on the spot for a moment before flapping its wings. Amidst the howling winds, it reached out with its sharp claws and swiped towards the cave abode. Ling Hu was shocked. Just as he was about to dodge backwards, he realized that Little Crane was trapped in a region and could not escape at all. It could only slam around like a headless bug. Ling Hu laughed even more gleefully. Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief. That stupid bird clearly knew nothing about formations. Furthermore, its strength was not enough to break through the formation. In the following period of time, Su Zimo could finally calm down and cultivate. Su Zimo ignored Little Crane that was crashing around the entrance of the cave abode. Retrieving spirit stones from his storage bag, he channeled his chi condensation and began cultivating. His cultivation realm had stagnated for 3 months and he had to raise it as soon as possible. Even though he had just refined a cauldron of spirit-gathering elixirs, Su Zimo had no intention of consuming them. Previously, Elixir Peak's master had revealed that apart from perfect elixirs, even supreme-grade elixirs would contain impurities. Whether or not those impurities would affect a cultivator differed. At that time, Su Zimo had already made a choice. Unless it was a perfect elixir without any impurities, he would not consume it easily. At that moment, Su Zimo had yet to realize that it was that choice that allowed him to establish an incomparably solid foundation on his path to immortality. Chapter 113. 3 days later, Su Zimo finally refined a cauldron of spirit-gathering elixirs, and there was a perfect elixir with 5 elixir patterns. Su Zimo placed the perfect spirit-gathering elixir into a jade bottle and kept it in his storage bag. For the past 3 days, Little Crane was trapped by the smoke-gathering formation and could not escape at all. After crying for 3 days and 3 nights, its throat was hoarse as it sprawled on the ground, looking at Su Zimo pitifully. Su Zimo arrived outside the smoke-gathering formation and looked at Little Crane with a fake smile, asking, "Silly bird, do you know what's good for you now?" Little Crane nodded hurriedly, giving off a look of submission. Su Zimo was unmoved. That silly bird had an extremely high status and had probably never been wronged in the sect before. How could it submit just like that? If Su Zimo were to let it go, that silly bird might return and cause an even greater ruckus. "Stay here for 3 months. I'll naturally let you go after the 5 Peaks face-off at the end of the year," Su Zimo said indifferently. "Caw-caw." Little Crane turned hostile immediately and cried loudly at Su Zimo, as though it was threatening something. Su Zimo scoffed coldly and ignored it, leaving his cave abode on his sword and speeding towards Elixir Peak. If one wanted to be number 1 of Elixir Peak, it was not enough to just refine spirit-gathering elixirs. The most difficult part of weapon refinement was spirit gathering. The most difficult part of alchemy was the understanding of the vast, complex, and endless variety of spirit herbs. A qualified elementary elixir refinement master should be able to differentiate the temperature of the spirit herbs used to refine grade 1 elixirs, as well as the attributes of the various spirit herbs. If one was not familiar with those things and did not know all the spirit herbs in a formula given by someone else, how could they refine elixirs? Even more incredible elixir refinement masters could rely on their imagination and creativity to break the rules of the formula and refine a brand new elixir according to their own proportions. Of course, all of that was still too far away for Su Zimo. The reason why Su Zimo headed to Elixir Peak this time round was to exchange for a manual on grade 1 spirit herbs to memorize. After that, he would exchange for some elixir recipes and herbs to continue refining elixirs. Not long after, Su Zimo returned to the cave residence. For the next few days, Su Zimo cultivated while refining elixirs in his cave abode. Little Crane was trapped in the formation and had nothing to eat. It had lost an entire size and looked even more pitiful. Ling Hu could not bear to see it like that. Whenever he went out to look for food, he would bring some back for Little Crane and even chat with it occasionally. During this period of time, the relationship between the tiger and the crane had become much more harmonious. However, the way Little Crane looked at Su Zimo was still filled with resentment and refused to give in. Su Zimo couldn't be bothered to respond. On this day, Su Zimo refined another cauldron of pills. Among them, there were 2 4-pattern supreme grade pills, and the rest were all 3-patterned high-grade pills. Su Zimo was about to put away those pills when his heart skipped a beat. He would not consume those pills himself. However, they contained the essence of spirit herbs after all. If he gave them to spirit beasts, would they have an effect and raise their cultivation realm rapidly as well? At that thought, Su Zimo handed over the pills that gave off a faint medicinal fragrance to Ling Hu and was about to ask. Ling Hu wagged its tail with a fawning expression. The moment it opened its mouth, saliva flowed out. All right, that saved him the trouble of asking. "Look at that useless face of yours." Su Zimo scolded jokingly and tossed the pills that he had just refined over casually. Ling Hu leaped up and opened its mouth to catch one of the pills. It munched on it and swallowed it with a look of enjoyment. Little Crane, who was trapped in the formation, was dumbfounded when it saw that. That works too. Little Crane was dumbfounded. It had eaten elixirs in the past as well. However, even though its mother was a mystical guardian beast, the elixirs it consumed were at best middle grade. Little Crane had never seen someone like Su Zimo, who fed superior grade elixirs to a dog so casually. When Little Crane saw Ling Hu's fawning behavior earlier on, it shook its head and wagged its tail. It was no different from a dog. Little Crane took a closer look. There were even supreme grade elixirs inside. It was too extravagant. It was too wasteful. It was too exciting. It was too sinful. But I like it. Little Crane jumped up from the ground excitedly and blinked at the spirit tiger, raising its head repeatedly to signal to it. In the cultivation world, there were many cultivators who reared spirit beasts. However, there were very few who were willing to feed them elixirs, let alone superior grade and supreme grade ones. Even cultivators could not bear to consume elixirs of such quality, let alone feed them to spirit beasts. For the past few days, Little Crane felt that it was getting along well with Linghu, and wanted Linghu to share some of the elixirs with it. Linghu glared at Little Crane and hesitated for a long time before picking up the worst quality elixir from the ground and tossing it into the smoke-gathering formation. Little Crane was fuming, but there was nothing it could do. Linghu scampered back and swiped on the ground, protecting the remaining elixirs in front of him. By the looks of it, Linghu would fight to the death with anyone who dared to touch those elixirs. Su Zimo shook his head and chuckled. Retrieving a few more jade bottles from his storage bag, he poured out the elixirs inside and placed them in front of Linghu. Most of them were superior grade 3 patterned elixirs with a small number of supreme grade 4 patterned ones. Even the worst quality elixirs were middle grade elixirs. Su Zimo said, "These are all for you. Hurry and raise your cultivation realm." Linghu was dazzled by the sight. Happiness came too suddenly. "I finally made it to spring." Linghu dove into the pile of elixirs and almost fainted from the medicinal fragrance. Little Crane was getting increasingly anxious and chirped non-stop. However, its voice could not be heard. "How can you finish so many elixirs? Share some with me." A moment later, Linghu finally snapped out of his stupor and swallowed a few more elixirs before sprawling on the ground and snoring. Every single spirit beast was born with the innate ability to cultivate. However, some spirit beasts with strong bloodlines had inherited memories and cultivation techniques were naturally stronger. Linghu only had an ordinary bloodline, and the cultivation technique he cultivated could not compare to the marrow cleansing section, let alone the entire mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Su Zimo had once thought of imparting the marrow cleansing section to Linghu so that the latter could become stronger. However, Daiyu had warned him not to impart this cultivation technique to anyone else, and Su Zimo could only give up on that thought. When Little Crane saw that no one was paying attention to it, it felt aggrieved and could only pick up the elixir that Linghu had just handed over and swallow it before starting to cultivate as well. Within a few days, the tiger and crane had finished all the elixirs. Little Crane's cultivation realm had increased. After all, it was at the spirit demon realm and had eaten few elixirs, so the increase was not obvious. However, Linghu's aura was clearly more ferocious. His gaze was cold and his fur turned golden, standing up like golden needles that shone with a cold glint. At this rate, Linghu would be able to grow into a foundation establishment spirit demon before long. After consuming the elixirs, Linghu and Little Crane were still yearning for more. The two spirit beasts looked at Su Zimo every day, waiting for him to refine elixirs. By then, Su Zimo had finished exchanging for spirit herbs as well. He no longer had any contribution points on him. If he were to head to Elixir Peak to exchange for more spirit herbs, he would have to use spirit stones. As for spirit stones, Su Zimo had to keep them to raise his cultivation realm. Looking at the expectant gazes of the two spirit beasts, Su Zimo shrugged and shook his head. No more elixirs, no more elixirs. He was thunderstruck. That news was way too much of a blow for the tiger and crane. They were already addicted to the elixirs and had yet to have their fill. Now, he was not going to refine elixirs. Chapter 114. The main reason why Su Zimo stopped refining elixirs was because he did not need it for the time being. It was just like weapon refinement. Since he could already refine inferior grade spirit weapons, there was no need for Su Zimo to waste his time on it. There were only 2 months left to the end of the year face-off. At that moment, Su Zimo's cultivation realm had also reached level 7 Qi condensation. Coupled with the perfect spirit gathering elixir that he had refined previously, it would not be a problem for him to reach level 9 Qi condensation by the end of the year. However, it would be impossible for him to reach perfected Qi condensation. At perfected Qi condensation, a sea of Qi would form in one's dantian, causing a quantitative change that was much stronger than level 9 Qi condensation. This required sufficient elixirs, spirit stones, and a long period of cultivation. Even Heaven Spirit Root cultivators could not avoid this. Because Little Crane had consumed quite a number of Su Zimo's elixirs during this period of time, the relationship between the man and Crane had improved significantly even though it was still trapped in the smoke-gathering formation. However, Su Zimo still did not dare to release Little Crane. This day Little Fatty arrived at Su Zimo's cave abode once more. Little Fatty was heartened to see that Su Zimo's cultivation realm had finally improved, thinking that Su Zimo had finally pulled himself together. At that moment, Little Fatty's cultivation realm was already at the peak of level 8 Qi condensation. He would definitely be able to reach level 9 Qi condensation before the end of the year. That was already an extremely fast speed. However, it was still slightly inferior to Feng Haoyu and Lung Ro. Logically speaking, the cultivation speed of a Heaven Spirit Root would not be inferior to a Variant Spirit Root. Su Zimo could vaguely sense that Little Fatty's body was different. Even though it could not be compared to him, it was still much stronger than other Qi refinement warriors. There was a high chance that Little Fatty had used a portion of his spirit Qi on body tempering. That was why he was not at the same level as Feng Haoyu and Lung Ro. Little Fatty had come to teach Su Zimo the art of sword raining, as well as many cultivation methods on how to fight against cultivators. Just like what Xianyi had said, the Qi refinement warriors' fighting techniques were relatively simple. There was not much that needed to be explained. Most of it had to be practiced in actual combat. During this month, Little Fatty stayed in Su Zimo's cave. The two of them sparred every day, and Su Zimo's sword manipulation technique became more and more proficient. At first, Su Zimo was completely at a disadvantage. Often, Little Fatty would summon his flying sword and use some techniques to subdue Su Zimo within 3 moves. However, as time passed by, Su Zimo was gradually able to fight evenly with Little Fatty, exchanging blows back and forth. Later on, Ling Hu joined the battle as well and attacked Su Zimo together with Little Fatty. Initially, Su Zimo was not used to being surrounded by a man and a tiger. However, as his sword manipulation technique improved, Su Zimo was able to parry the attacks without being disadvantaged. During this period of time, what puzzled Little Fatty the most was that even though Su Zimo was at level 7 Qi condensation, he was able to take on level 8 Qi condensation head-on. This meant that the quality of Su Zimo's spirit Qi was even higher than that of Little Fatty's. However, that did not make sense at all. Both of them had Heaven Spirit Roots. Why was there a difference in the quality of their spirit Qi? Little Fatty had asked about it before as well. Su Zimo shook his head, indicating that he did not know. In reality, Su Zimo already had a conjecture in his heart. That was because spirit Qi would undergo a qualitative change after entering his body through his right hand, causing it to become purer and more refined. Su Zimo could vaguely sense that there might be something else that Dai Yu left for him in his right hand. That was also the reason why he could control a level 3 spirit fire. However, something as strange as that was naturally something that Su Zimo would not mention to anyone. This day, Little Fatty was already planning to leave. He had already taught Su Zimo everything he had learned in Spirit Peak. There was no point in staying any longer. Before he left, Little Fatty suddenly said mysteriously, "Bro, it seemed like we were evenly matched the past few days. However, in reality I still have a trump card." "Oh." Su Zimo raised his brows slightly. A smug look flashed through Little Fatty's eyes as he smiled. "Bro, I've actually cultivated a body tempering technique that expended quite a bit of spirit Qi. Otherwise, I would have reached perfected Qi condensation by the end of the year as well." Indeed, Su Zimo had guessed correctly. When Little Fatty saw that Su Zimo's reaction was not strong enough, he thought that the latter did not know about the strength of body tempering. Hence, he came up excitedly and said, "Bro, you've never fought against a body tempering cultivator before. If I use this trump card, you'll definitely lose." "Is that so?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. When he heard that tone, Little Fatty glared and harumphed softly. "Bro, don't doubt me. Let's spar again so that you can see my capabilities." "Alright," Su Zimo nodded in agreement. Little Fatty summoned a pseudo-spirit sword that was only a pseudo-spirit weapon. Among the 5 peaks, there were not many trial disciples who could obtain an inferior grade spirit weapon. Little Fatty had only joined the sect for less than a year, and naturally did not have an inferior grade flying sword. Naturally, Su Zimo would not use the inferior grade flying sword that he had refined previously, and would only summon a pseudo-spirit weapon flying sword. "Go." Both of them shot out a stream of spirit chi from their fingertips into their flying swords. The two flying swords shuttled through the cave abode and clashed repeatedly. Cling! Clang! The sound of metal clashing echoed endlessly and sparks flew everywhere. In terms of sword kinesis, both of them were evenly matched and neither of their flying swords could penetrate the other's defense. Right then Little Fatty hollered softly and slapped his storage bag, pulling out a gigantic axe. The gigantic axe looked similar to Little Fatty's figure, and it looked extremely strange when he held it in his hands. Little Fatty took advantage of the fact that both of their flying swords were fighting in midair to raise the gigantic axe. A yellow light flashed on his body as he leaped forward and arrived before Suzimo with incomparable agility. Swoosh! The gigantic axe descended from the skies and tore through the void, creating a gust of wind with a frightening aura. Before it arrived, Suzimo's hair was already flying behind him. Haha bro, you've lost! Little Fatty roared in laughter. When he saw that the gigantic axe was about to chop Suzimo's head, he hurriedly retracted it. Right then, Suzimo's expression was unchanged as he reached out and grabbed the incoming gigantic axe. Bang! The gigantic axe collided with the palm, but the sound of defeat could be heard. The gigantic axe did not budge at all. Little Fatty was shocked and ran over hurriedly, asking in a panic, "Bro, why you alright? Why did you grab my weapon?" Suzimo tossed the gigantic axe on the ground casually and retracted his fingernails that he had just reached out. Little Fatty picked up Suzimo's palm and flipped it around a few times. To his surprise, he did not find any injuries at all. Fine. Unharmed? The way Little Fatty looked at Suzimo changed gradually. Even if his physical body was strong, he would definitely not dare to grab a weapon with his bare hands. That was no different from courting death. However, what happened just now happened right before Little Fatty's eyes. Before Little Fatty could retract his attack, the gigantic axe was already grabbed by Suzimo. That feeling was as though he was chopping at an unshakable mountain. Bro, you... Little Fatty's eyes were filled with bewilderment. Suzimo smiled casually and said, "I've also cultivated body tempering techniques. You have to help me hide it." "Alright, definitely, Little Fatty nodded instinctively. Chapter 115. When Little Fatty left Suzimo's cave abode, he was still filled with doubts and was in a daze. He could not react to what had just happened just now. In the cultivation world, there was no lack of advanced body tempering techniques. However, he had never heard of any body tempering techniques that allowed one to grab a weapon barehanded. Furthermore, he was completely unharmed. Even demons who were known for their strong physiques would not dare to do something like that, right? Suddenly, Little Fatty recalled the scene when he first joined the sect. Suzimo was able to carry him on his back and deal with a spirit demon crane on a steep cliff. That was not something that could be done through body tempering techniques alone. Frowning, Little Fatty suddenly recalled that the moment the gigantic axe collided with Suzimo's palm, there was a strange sound mixed in with the dull thud. It sounded like something sharp had collided with a weapon and let out a crisp sound. Because it was sudden, Little Fatty did not think too much about it. Now that he thought about it, it was rather strange. Instinctively, Little Fatty took out his gigantic axe and swept his gaze across it. Instantly, his pupils constricted and the hairs on his neck stood on end. His eyes were filled with shock. On the surface of the giant axe there were actually 5 small holes. Taking a deep breath of air, Little Fatty suppressed the shock in his heart and reached out with his palm, gesturing on the surface of the axe. Grabbing his palm on the edge of the axe, his fingers landed on the 5 holes. Gulp! Little Fatty's throat moved as he gulped. Hurriedly, Little Fatty put away his gigantic axe and adjusted his state of mind before leaving the spot. In the cave abode, Suzimo looked at his palm and sighed gently. Earlier on, he had only wanted to grab Little Fatty's axe on a whim. However, he did not expect that he would not be able to suppress the power of his bloodline and force out his razor-sharp fingernails. If this scene was seen by Little Fatty, it might not be a big deal. But if it fell into the eyes of the seniors of the sect, it might arouse suspicion and even expose his demonic bloodline. This matter is ultimately troublesome. Suzimo shook his head, a trace of worry hanging between his brows. There was only a month left before the year-end face-off. Su Zimo had also just broken through to level 8 Qi condensation. Su Zimo took out the weapon refining cauldron from his storage bag. In the remaining month, Su Zimo had to master the tripartite sword formation no matter what. It would be best if he could master the hexagonal sword formation. Only then would he have a greater chance of defeating Feng Haoyu. The prerequisite for cultivating a sword formation was to refine a set of flying swords. Su Zimo already had one low-grade flying sword, so he still needed to refine 5 more. For Su Zimo, refining low-grade flying swords was no longer a problem. In terms of spirit gathering, Su Zimo had a 100% success rate with the help of his spirit perception. However, he was still unable to refine middle-grade spirit weapons for some unknown reason. After a day, Su Zimo finally managed to refine 5 inferior-grade flying swords to complete a set. In the cave abode, Su Zimo recalled the contents of the tripartite sword formation and began cultivating. The control of flying swords was extremely high in order to set up a sword formation. It had to be done perfectly. Thankfully, with Little Fatty's help last month, Su Zimo had already established a foundation in sword wielding. Right now, all he had to do was to learn how to control multiple flying swords. In the final month, the atmosphere in the 5 peaks was clearly tenser. Most of the disciples were cultivating in seclusion in their cave abodes, preparing to showcase their prowess at the 5 peaks face-off. The commotion caused by the mysterious challenger of Array Peak had gradually died down as well. Some time ago, the identity of the mysterious challenger was the most popular topic among the disciples of the 5 peaks, and there were people making guesses almost every day. As the end of the year approached, the number of people discussing the matter gradually decreased. This day, a bell rang continuously from Ethereal Palace. There were a total of 5 rings. The 5 peaks face-off had officially begun. Many trial disciples walked out of their cave abodes one after another. Energized, they sped towards Weapon Peak. The 5 peaks face-off was held over 5 days. Because Weapon and Elixir Peak were the weakest, the 2 peaks face-offs were arranged on the first and second day according to previous arrangements. However, things were different this year. Everyone in the 5 peaks knew about the challenge between Feng Haoyu and Su Zimo. Coincidentally, both of them would be participating in the Weapon and Elixir Peak face-offs at the same time. Be it weapon or elixir refinement, it was draining on spirit chi, stamina and mental state. In order to ensure that both of them would be able to participate in the face-off in peak condition, the 5 peak masters decided to separate the 2 peaks this year. First day, Weapon Peak face-off. Second day, Talisman Peak face-off. Third day, Elixir Peak face-off. Fourth day, Array Peak face-off. Fifth day, Spirit Peak face-off. Spirit Peak's face-off was the most popular among the 5 peaks, and would always be held last every year. The reason why Array Peak's face-off was arranged earlier was to allow Feng Haoyu to rest after Elixir Peak's face-off in preparation for Spirit Peak's face-off. The Weapon Peak face-off was held in Weapon Peak's Weapon Refinement Hall. On the first day, almost all disciples of the 5 peaks were gathered outside the Weapon Refinement Hall. In fact, there were even many inner sect disciples who rushed over. Weapon Peak had never been so lively before. At a single glance, it was densely packed with people. The reason for that was because the first day of the Weapon Peak face-off was also the first match between Feng Haoyu and Su Zimo. Everyone was watching. In terms of weapon refinement, everyone wanted to know if Spirit Peak's Feng Haoyu, who possessed a wind spirit root, was better, or if Su Zimo, who had cultivated a level 3 spirit fire, would have the last laugh. Prior to this, the disciples of the 5 peaks had already made bets in private to see who would win. In the Weapon Refinement Hall, the 5 peak masters sat at the front. Below them stood more than 100 participating disciples. The spectating disciples could only stand outside the hall, and were not allowed to enter lest they disturb the weapon refinement process of the sect disciples. Make way, make way! A holler sounded from outside the crowd, as though someone had arrived. The crowd parted to the sides, revealing a path. A Qi refinement warrior in purple robe strode in with his hands behind his back. He had an arrogant expression as he entered the Weapon Refinement Hall. It was Feng Haoyu who was here for the face-off. Amazing! He's already at perfected Qi condensation. That's not all. Let me tell you, senior brother Feng was already at perfected Qi condensation half a month ago. Right now, he's only a step away from foundation establishment. I wonder what cultivation realm Su Zimo is at right now. If it's too far apart, there's really nothing to look forward to in the final spar between the two of them. Right then, another shout sounded from the crowd. Su Zimo is here. Everyone turned to look. Not far away, Su Zimo flew over on his sword. He was still dressed in green robes and had a calm expression, looking as though he was not under any pressure at all. Ha! A disciple could not help but scoff. Am I seeing things? He's only at level 8 Qi condensation? Fufu, you're right. There's a difference of 2 levels. We don't even need to fight to know the outcome of the final battle. Another disciple shook his head and chuckled, unable to conceal the disdain in his eyes. If I were Su Zimo, I would admit defeat as soon as possible lest I get beaten up too badly in front of everyone and embarrass myself. Chapter 116. Hearing the mockery from the crowd, Su Zimo's expression was indifferent as he headed straight for the weapon refinement hall as though he did not hear anything. Because he had spent 3 months on Array Peak and spent most of his time on sword formations, Su Zimo's cultivation realm did not reach level 9 Qi condensation as expected. Of course, there were still a few days before his final battle with Feng Haoyu. If Su Zimo made the best use of his time to cultivate, there was still a chance for him to reach level 9 Qi condensation. Bro, all the best. Little Fatty's voice sounded from the crowd as he waved his fist at Su Zimo. Su Zimo smiled and nodded before entering the weapon refinement hall. In the hall, Shui and the others nodded to Su Zimo when they caught sight of him. Junior brother Su, don't be distracted by the words outside. Calm down and you'll definitely win. Shui whispered as he passed by. Yes, the same goes for you, senior brother Shui. Su Zimo replied with a smile. Don't worry. Now that I've cultivated a level 2 spirit fire, I might not lose to Feng Haoyu. Shui's eyes flashed with confidence. It was already rather difficult to cultivate a level 2 spirit fire at the Qi condensation realm. This time round, Su Zimo did not stand at the back of the hall. Instead, he walked to the front and stood right beside Feng Haoyu. Gradually, the atmosphere in the hall turned tense. Junior brother Su, I haven't seen you for half a year. Although your cultivation hasn't increased much, you've grown bolder. Feng Haoyu glanced at Su Zimo and said indifferently, I've always been bold. Su Zimo's tone was calm as he looked straight ahead. Feng Haoyu continued, if you beg for mercy and admit defeat now, I'll leave you with some dignity after the Spirit Peak face-off and won't let you lose too badly. Is that so? Su Zimo smiled indifferently. Of course, Feng Haoyu wasn't simply trying to bicker with Su Zimo. More importantly, he wanted to disturb Su Zimo's mental state. Regardless of whether it was artifact forging or pill forging, the slightest fluctuation in one's state of mind could lead to failure. Unfortunately, Feng Haoyu's objective was not achieved. His 2 punches seemed to have landed on cotton, unable to exert any force. Oh right, I forgot to tell you something. The corners of Feng Haoyu's mouth curled up slightly. Suddenly he stretched out his palm. With a whoosh, a ball of flame rose from his palm. Dark red in color. A level 2 spirit fire. Immediately after, Feng Haoyu's palm moved and a gust of spirit wind was injected into the level 2 spirit fire. Whoosh! The flames surged and its color intensified. In the blink of an eye it turned scarlet. Level 3 spirit fire. Right then, Feng Haoyu's voice rang out, I've also cultivated a level 3 spirit fire. Your greatest reliance is nothing in front of me. Feng Haoyu's intention was clear. He was pressuring them again. The greater the pressure Su Zimo was under, the more nervous he would be, and the easier it would be for him to make mistakes. When they saw the level 3 spirit fire in Feng Haoyu's palm, exclamations could be heard from both inside and outside the hall. Initially, I thought that the first round would be intense. But now it seems like Su Zimo's chances of winning aren't high. That's right. Both of their spirit fires are of the same level. How can Su Zimo's weapon refinement techniques compare to senior brother Feng's? Shui's vision darkened. He had only managed to cultivate a level 2 spirit fire after giving it his all. Initially, he thought that he would be able to compete against Feng Haoyu. To think that he would still be weaker. The other disciples participating in the Weapon Peak face-off turned grim and nervous as well. In the hall, Su Zimo was the only one who had a calm expression. He merely glanced over indifferently before retracting his gaze. Upon seeing this, the 5 peak masters secretly praised in their hearts. No matter what, that composed attitude of his was more than enough for him to look down on the entire place. The disheveled old man stood up and gestured downwards with both hands. Gradually the crowd quietened down. All disciples participating in the weapon peak face-off can come forward to choose any materials you want to refine. Feel free to refine any weapon you want. Once you're done, submit your weapon and we'll judge the outcome. The moment the disheveled old man said that, the disciples in the hall came forward one after another to choose the spirit ores they wanted. There were more than 10 piles of spirit ores at the front. Most of them were pure gold ores which were used to refine flying swords, while the other spirit ores were much rarer. The first step of weapon refinement was to choose the materials. If one wanted to refine flying swords apart from pure gold ores, they would have to add another 2 or 3 supplementary spirit ores. If they added too many spirit ores, it would mean that there would be more impurities and it would be harder to refine and take a longer time. In every weapon peak face-off, none of the disciples could refine inferior grade spirit weapons. Everyone was refining pseudo-spirit weapons. On one hand, it was the quality that mattered. On the other hand, it was the speed of refinement. Before long, the disciples were done choosing their materials. Su Zimo was the only one who was still pacing back and forth in front of the dozens of spirit ores. No one knew what he was thinking about. Su Zimo already had 6 flying swords. If he were to refine another one, it would be redundant. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo chose some of each of the dozens of spirit ores and brought them back. That scene naturally attracted the mockery of many people. The more spirit ores there were, the heavier the spirit weapon would be. If he were to refine a flying sword, he would lose the advantage of being light and nimble. The losses would outweigh the gains. Is Su Zimo stupid? He can't be thinking of refining a gigantic hammer, right? Haha. By the looks of it, that's possible. Don't laugh. Who knows, he might want to refine a gigantic flying sword and scare you to death. A commotion broke out outside the hall. Even the disheveled old man frowned in confusion when he saw Su Zimo's actions. The disciples returned to their positions and took out their weapon tripods, ready. Waving his hand, the disheveled old man declared in a deep voice, "The weapon peak face-off has officially begun." The moment he said that, flames lit up the hall. One after another, balls of spirit fire danced in the palms of the disciples, illuminating the entire hall in a bright red color. The outside of the hall quietened down as well. Among them, Feng Haoyu and Su Zimo's level 3 spirit fires were the most eye-catching. The second was Shui Yi's level 2 spirit fire. The second step of weapon refinement, tripod warming. Almost at the same time, Feng Haoyu and Su Zimo were the first to finish warming their tripods and began placing in the spirit ores. Both of their movements were fluid. It was clear that they had put in a lot of effort. The 5 peak masters nodded to themselves. The scarlet flames burned continuously beneath the weapon tripod, causing the temperature within to rise. Before long, the spirit ores were showing signs of melting. Because Su Zimo's spirit ores were more heterogeneous, the speed of smelting was significantly slower. Even with the help of his level 3 spirit fire, Su Zimo was already lagging behind most of the disciples in this step. An hour later, the spirit or liquid within Feng Haoyu's tripod was no longer decreasing. The first smelting was complete. As for Su Zimo's weapon tripod, the spirit ores had just melted and were burning red, bubbling as they refined the impurities. At that moment, Feng Haoyu's advantage was clear. He was way ahead of Su Zimo. However, Su Zimo was in no hurry. Unhurriedly, he stared at the spirit ores within the weapon tripod and increased the flames, trying his best to refine the impurities within. By the time Feng Haoyu was done with molding and began the 4th step of tempering, Su Zimo had just finished smelting and was 2 steps behind. There was a lot of spirit or liquid left in Su Zimo's weapon tripod. It was more than enough to refine a few flying swords, let alone a single one. Just what sort of spirit weapon was he trying to refine? The same question flashed through everyone's minds. Chapter 117. What Su Zimo wanted to refine was a gigantic axe. During this period of time, Little Fatty had helped him a lot. The previous time they fought, Su Zimo even unintentionally dug 5 holes in Little Fatty's gigantic axe. That gigantic axe was made for Little Fatty. Another hour passed. While the other cultivators were starting to shape, Su Zimo had just finished smelting and assumed a lotus position, recovering his spirit chi while waiting for the weapon tripod to cool down. He had already eliminated a few disciples with this step. Those disciples did not manage to control the cooling temperature properly and could not shape the weapon. All their efforts were for naught. Another 15 minutes passed. Suddenly, Su Zimo stood up and conjured a pair of hands with spirit chi, extending them into the weapon tripod to begin shaping. On the other side, a series of clanging sounds could be heard. He had already begun tempering. Each time the wind hammer struck, it would refine the impurities in the flying sword once more, causing it to be even tougher. The flying sword that was burned scarlet let out sparks under the strikes of the wind hammer. In reality, those sparks were the impurities in the flying sword that fell to the bottom of the tripod. On the other side, Su Zimo was also done with his shaping. What's that? A gigantic axe? Furthermore, isn't that axe way too stupid? It's a waste of spirit chi to control. Who would use that? That's right. That gigantic axe has already lost the nimbleness of a spirit weapon. Instead, it's more like a weapon of the pugilistic world. It's inferior. Outside the hall, many disciples were discussing Su Zimo's gigantic axe. Little Fatty was the only one who blinked and thought of a possibility. Su Zimo's expression was calm as usual. After shaping, he conjured a level 3 spirit fire once more and began to burn the gigantic axe. Before long, the gigantic axe was burned to a sparkling scarlet state. Just as Su Zimo was about to start tempering, Feng Haoyu was already done. At that moment, Feng Haoyu hesitated. The next step was the most crucial step of weapon refinement: spirit gathering. Right now, Feng Haoyu's advantage was obvious. Be it the shape of the spirit artifact or the speed of its refinement, he was superior to Su Zimo. However, if the spirit gathering failed and the flying sword exploded, he would be eliminated immediately. Choosing to gather spirit required a lot of courage. In these few months, Feng Haoyu had indeed succeeded in gathering spirit once, but at such a crucial moment, he did not dare to gamble. After hesitating for a long time, Feng Haoyu gave up on spirit gathering and directly placed the refined flying sword into cold water. With a piercing sound, green smoke billowed as the flying sword took shape. For this weapon peak face-off, Feng Haoyu was the first to refine a spirit weapon. He then placed his flying sword on the table and returned to his original spot, looking at Su Zimo calmly. Senior brother Feng won. That's right. Unless Su Zimo successfully gathers his spirit, there's no way he can win. Successful spirit gathering? Was that even possible? Don't forget, it hasn't even been a year since he entered the sect. Under such a tense and exciting atmosphere, even if a high-grade weapon refiner were to come, the chances of spirit gathering would be greatly reduced. The many spirit peak disciples watching outside heaved a sigh of relief. The second to complete his tempering was Shui of Weapon Peak. With a level 2 spirit fire, Shui's weapon refinement speed was much faster than others. The next step was spirit gathering. Unlike Feng Haoyu, Shui did not give up and chose spirit gathering. When he saw that, the disheveled old man nodded to himself. To be fair, Feng Haoyu's talent in weapon refinement was indeed decent and even surpassed Shui's. However, he lacked the courage. If Feng Haoyu had chosen spirit gathering earlier on, the disheveled old man would have truly thought highly of him. Even if they did not know weapon refinement, many disciples knew how difficult spirit gathering was. Shui's choice of spirit gathering attracted many gazes. With a grim expression, Shui carefully controlled the spirit chi within the weapon tripod and slowly channeled it towards the sword. Crack! A crisp sound rang out from within the tripod. It was extremely clear in the hall. Oh no! Shui knew that things were bad. Many disciples shook their heads. That sound was the sound of cracks appearing on the sword. True enough. The next moment there was a cracking sound. A loud sound rang out from Shui's weapon tripod as the flying sword exploded. The shards ricocheted against the walls of the tripod, letting out a series of clanging sounds. Spirit gathering failed. Smiling bitterly, Shui put away his weapon tripod and bowed to the 5 peak masters before leaving the weapon refinement hall. The explosion of his flying sword meant that he was eliminated. Following that, the other disciples completed their weapon refinement one after another. Other than Shui Yi, none of them dared to attempt spirit gathering. Right then, Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief and ended his tempering. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless gazes landed on Su Zimo. Some of the Weapon Peak disciples had a hint of anticipation in their gazes. Su Zimo had already become the final hope of Weapon Peak. If Su Zimo failed as well, it would mean that the number one of Weapon Peak would be snatched away by an Outer Peak disciple. Even though they were all fellow disciples of the same sect, that was not an honor for Weapon Peak. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo suddenly did something that shocked everyone. He removed his weapon tripod. What is he doing? Is he giving up on spirit gathering? I'm not sure. If Su Zimo gave up on spirit gathering, all he had to do was remove the gigantic axe from the weapon tripod and soak it in cold water. If he chose spirit gathering, there was no need for him to remove his weapon tripod. Right in front of everyone, Su Zimo's expression was grim, as he manipulated the spirit chi around the gigantic axe and started to condense it around the axe. Spirit gathering. Su Zimo still chose spirit gathering. However, this scene was truly a little strange. Throughout history, there had never been a weapon refinement master who would remove his weapon tripod during spirit gathering. It was way too dangerous for weapon refinement masters and was completely unnecessary. If the spirit gathering failed and the spirit weapon exploded, the weapon refinement master would be the first to suffer. When the disheveled old man saw that, his heart tightened as he stood up instinctively, wanting to stop Su Zimo. However, at that moment, Su Zimo had already begun spirit gathering. If the disheveled old man interrupted and Su Zimo was distracted, the spirit gathering would definitely fail. Frowning, the disheveled old man hesitated for a long time before sitting back down. He was tense and prepared to save Su Zimo at any moment. Feng Haoyu, who was initially standing beside Su Zimo, was also shocked by that action and dodged to the side hurriedly. Right then, Su Zimo turned his head and asked with a fake smile while gathering, "Why are you running? Are you scared?" There was an uproar both inside and outside the hall. During spirit gathering, one had to be extremely focused and could not afford to be careless. Who would be like Su Zimo? Not only did he remove his weapon tripod, he even went to chat with others. Wasn't he courting death? In reality, no one knew that Su Zimo relied on his spirit perception to gather spirit. Even if he was distracted, his spirit perception would warn him the moment there were signs of spirit gathering failing, and Su Zimo would naturally stop. Lunatic. Feng Haoyu remarked coldly and took a few more steps back. Initially, there were other disciples around Su Zimo. Some of them had just finished refining their weapons and retreated far away without even handing over their flying swords. Some of them were still refining their spirit weapons when they saw that and were scared out of their wits. They threw their spirit weapons into their weapon tripods and turned to run, hating their parents for not giving them an extra pair of legs. The weapon refinement hall was in chaos. In the blink of an eye, there was no one else around Su Zimo apart from the 5 peak masters. Chapter 118. For many years, there had never been such a chaotic scene in Weapon Peak's face-off. Of course, there had never been someone like Su Zimo before either. In everyone's eyes, Su Zimo was a lunatic who did not care about his life. I think he's just trying to be mysterious because he knows that he's going to lose. In my opinion, Su Zimo has ulterior motives. Just now, he's probably trying to hurt senior brother Feng, so that there's no need for their final duel. Outside the hall, there were all sorts of guesses and discussions. Su Zimo, do you want to gather spirit or give up on it? Why are you doing something so strange? Spirit Peak's master Wen Xian frowned and asked sternly. Su Zimo chuckled. Of course it's to gather spirit. Why do you have to remove the weapon tripod for spirit gathering? Wen Xian asked again. I'm not allowed to? Su Zimo asked in return. Wen Xian was speechless. Indeed, there were no rules in weapon refinement that stated that spirit gathering had to be done in the weapon tripod. However, this was way too strange and incomprehensible. Right then, Su Zimo turned back to look at Feng Haoyu while gathering spirit and asked with a smile, Feng Haoyu, do you think that you're going to win for sure? Humph. Feng Haoyu harumphed coldly. I don't believe that you can successfully gather spirit. Alright, I'll show you then. In reality, Su Zimo had already tried to gather spirit multiple times during this conversation. However, he had stopped in time because he sensed danger. But this time round, a faint trace of a spirit pattern appeared on the axe without any signs of danger. Su Zimo was elated. It was done. Buzz. With a buzz, the axe shone brightly with a bedazzling glow that flashed before everyone's eyes. Spirit pattern. The discussions outside the hall quietened down gradually. Many disciples watched with widened mouths and their eyeballs nearly popped out of their sockets. Spirit gathering was a success? Wasn't spirit gathering supposed to be difficult? How did this Su Zimo manage to condense a spirit pattern out of nowhere after a casual conversation? Not to mention the many disciples outside the main hall, even the 5 peak masters were dumbfounded and confused. Luck? Coincidence? What was going on? After all, the other 4 peak masters did not know much about weapon refinement and looked at the disheveled old man inquisitively. The disheveled old man pondered for a long time but could not figure it out. He could only shake his head. With Su Zimo's spirit gathering success, there was no doubt that he would be the champion of this face-off. Feng Haoyu's expression instantly turned ugly. Even if his refining speed was fast enough, it was only a pseudo-spiritual weapon without a grade. We won. Haha, our weapon peak has won. Good job, junior brother Su. After a short moment of silence, a burst of cheers came from the crowd. Some of the Spirit Peak disciples who had initially thought highly of Feng Haoyu were crestfallen. Up till now, they were still confused. How did Su Zimo manage to succeed in spirit gathering as though he was possessed? Furthermore, he looked so relaxed. Other people might not even be able to refine an inferior grade spirit weapon after refining for many years. How did this lad manage to do it just by chatting? Feng Haoyu quickly composed himself and scoffed coldly before turning to leave. Very good, very good. You've won this round. Let's compete again at Elixir Peak's face-off. Feng Haoyu's voice sounded, but he had already disappeared into the crowd. With a splashing sound, Su Zimo dipped his gigantic axe into cold water. An inferior-grade gigantic axe was formed, looking ferocious and domineering. The blade of the axe shone with a cold glint as though it could split a mountain. Humph! So what if it's an inferior-grade spirit weapon? Which Qi refinement warrior would use such a clumsy axe? What a joke! A Spirit Peak disciple remarked sourly. I don't like what you're saying. That's what I like. Little Fatty was displeased on the spot. That Spirit Peak disciple sneered. What's the use of liking it? That's someone else's spirit weapon. Right then, Su Zimo beckoned to Little Fatty and said loudly, Fatty, this weapon was made for you. It's a gift for you. Ugh. The Spirit Peak disciple who spoke earlier had a steely expression as he scurried into the crowd and disappeared. Little Fatty ran over to Su Zimo excitedly, rubbing his chubby palms together. He wanted to laugh but was embarrassed. Bro, is this really for me? Up till now, Little Fatty did not have an inferior grade spirit weapon with him. To think that Su Zimo would make one for him personally. Furthermore, this gigantic axe was way too suitable for him, as though it was tailor-made for him. With this inferior-grade spirit weapon, Little Fatty would definitely be able to obtain a decent ranking at Spirit Peak's face-off. Yes, take it. Su Zimo nodded and handed the gigantic axe to Little Fatty. Little Fatty received it and could not bear to part with it as he said intoxicatedly, I'm going to hug it to sleep today. With that said, Little Fatty even kissed the gigantic axe fiercely. Seeing this, the 5 Peak Masters let out a faint smile. The brown-haired youth whispered, That's quite a big favor. It's just a pity. If Su Zimo could make use of this opportunity to refine an inferior-grade flying sword for himself, he might have a chance against Feng Haoyu, Xianyi said. When Xian shook his head, the difference in strength between him and Feng Haoyu is too great. It's not something that 1 or 2 inferior-grade spirit weapons can make up for. The disheveled old man waved it off. It's fine. Since he's the number 1 of Weapon Peak, Su Zimo will have a chance to choose an inferior-grade spirit weapon from the spirit weapon chamber as well. The disheveled old man stood up and declared loudly, The result of this Weapon Peak face-off is clear. Disciple of Weapon Peak, Su Zimo, is number 1. Many Weapon Peak disciples cheered loudly. The disheveled old man continued, Su Zimo, Come up and tell us what was the meaning behind your action of removing the weapon tripod earlier on. That? Suzimo had a hesitant expression. It's fine. There's no seniority in cultivation, and those who are stronger are the masters. Share your insights and let everyone learn from them, the disheveled old man encouraged. Suzimo walked to the disheveled old man and whispered, Master, my method might not be suitable for others. To be fair, Suzimo was the only one who could use this spirit-gathering technique, and no one else would be able to learn it. It's fine, just say a few words, the disheveled old man persuaded again. Helpless, Suzimo could only head to the front and cough gently to the disciples of the 5 peaks. Inside and outside the hall, the disciples perked up their ears. Removing the weapon tripod is a habit of mine. I feel that the success rate of spirit gathering will be higher. Suzimo braced himself and replied ambiguously. What Suzimo did not know was that his casual remark was etched in the hearts of many disciples. Removing the weapon tripod could increase the success rate of spirit gathering. When he saw the sparkle in the eyes of many disciples, Suzimo added hurriedly, removing the weapon tripod is extremely dangerous. It's better for everyone not to try it. Although his words were said out of goodwill, many disciples mistakenly thought that Suzimo only said those words because he did not want them to learn this spirit-gathering technique. Therefore, for a period of time after that, the disciples of the sect started getting into accidents when they were refining weapons. They failed in spirit gathering and were blasted half dead by spirit weapon shards.